magazines and newspapers. He has served as a director of the Center for Land and Water Studies, or the Indian Army's premier think tank. That's where I met General Katoch, actually, where I was trying to push for the concepts of technological sovereignty, digital colonization, impact on the military, impact it will have on India's preparedness for war. And this was 2009. 2009 it was, and we see by 2019, 10 years later, those things started emerging. And we weren't fully prepared. We were prepared, but not fully prepared. Perhaps we'll hear some of those nuggets from General Katoch. But that's how I met General Katoch about 17 years back. In a distinguished career span, he has held instructional assignments in the infantry school, MAO, and the Indian Military Academy, Dehradun, and the senior staff appointments at the brigade, division, and corps level. Besides the NDC, the general officer is a graduate of the Defence Services Staff College, Wellington, and the Higher Command Course, MAO. MAO, as you all know, stands for Military Headquarters of Warfare. He has vast experience in sub-conventional conflict, having taken part in IPKF operations in Sri Lanka and also operations against terrorists and insurgents in J&K and various states in northeast India. He was commended by the Chief of Army Staff for operations against militants in Sri Lanka and was awarded Sena Medal while in command of his battalion in active operations on the line of control in J&K. He has commanded a sector as well as a division in the Northeast and subsequently retired as the Chief of Staff of an operational corps. The General Rights and Defense and Security related issues, an alumnus of the Sherwood College, Nainital, and his accent will give it away. The National Defense Academy, Khadagwasla, the Defense Services Staff College, Wellington, the Higher Command Course, MAO, and the National Defense College, New Delhi. He holds an MPhil in Defense Studies from Madras University and was conferred a Doctor of Philosophy by Indira Gandhi University. Thank you again, General Katoch. And General Katoch is also in our advisory board, and we pick on his brains quite often, except when he was having his other battles with health. Thank you, General, for being here. We also have our dear friend and distinguished guest for today's proceedings, Dr. Preetham Banerjee, who's the head of Center for WTO Studies. Again, we have been not just bouncing off things, we have really been firing things at him at pretty a high frequency of all kinds of thought processes that we generate, and he brings in the government viewpoint and the moderation in those thoughts. So we're grateful to you, Preetham. Dr. Preetham Banerjee brings several years of experience in the areas of economic policy, logistics, operations, trade facilitation, and trade policy. In fact, I met Preetham at ADP when we were working together on logistics, on multimodal logistics parks across Assam, Karnataka, 4 other places, trying to connect between Kolkata via Bangladesh into the Pandu port in Assam and getting the dredging done and so on and so forth. Clearing up a paper mill, Ashoka paper mills. This is 2017, 18 I'm talking about, right? And we were pretty pioneering work in creating a truly multimodal park, because that's perhaps the only place in India which has got connectivity with truck, with rail, with ship, with boat, and with airways. So there are 4 kinds of connectivity in that particular port. So he's currently the head of Center for WTO Studies and Center for Research in International Trade. Prior to his current role, he was engaged as logistics sector specialist at ADB. Dr. Banerjee was earlier with the Deutsche Post DHL Group as Senior Director for Public Policy responsible for South Asia region. Before that, he had served as the head of trade policy at CII and with the World Bank in Washington, D.C., where his work focused on trade facilitation and trade policy related issues. I don't know if you're winning that battle, but keep fighting. Dr. Banerjee was a member of the National Council of Trade Facilitation from 2016 to 2023 and had served as a special invitee to the Committee on Ease of Doing Business Reforms constituted under the Ministry of Commerce. As most of you know, that was a process that was started by me when I was in KPMG. We pushed Amitabh Khan to get this started off, and I think we did get some success over there. He was previously served as a member of the core group of the National Task Force on Export-Related Transportation Cost. And that's where we see a lot of trade facilitation in terms of internal trade facilitation happening. Dr. Banerjee is also a member of the Thought Leadership Committee of Esteemed Economists and Trade Professionals set up by Trade Promotion Council of India. He's got like a page more of his background. You can imagine everything that he brings in. Since we've already lost time and we're running out of time, I'll just come straight down to his academic qualifications. He's a PhD from the Scar School of Policy and Government, George Mason University, and a master's degree in economics from JNU Center for International Trade and Development. He has been extensively publishing in issues related to international trade, regional integration, regulatory reforms, logistics and connectivity and trade facilitation. Clearly the right person for the job, Dr. Banerjee, and thank you so much for being here. And again, I'm thankful to all my industry colleagues who are here, Dharma and representatives from ASSOCHAM and so on and so forth, and from the industry association. If you could perhaps just introduce, some of you are from outside, if you can just do a quick round of introduction, and then we'll start with the proceedings. So sir, starting with you.
Myself, S.P. Kathoria from Association of Magnet Fiber Industry of India. We represent East Coast Fiber and Yarn Industry.
Good morning, everyone. I am Dharma from Samsung India Electronics from the Public Affairs team. It's a pleasure to know sir, and I look forward to the report and the findings.
Good morning, everybody. I am Jagdish Arora from Manali Petrochemicals Limited, Chennai.
I am Divakar Uppal. I am from KPMG. I've worked with Jayjeet earlier.
Hi, I am Parijit. I am from the Public Affairs team of Chartered Technologies Limited, available group company.
Hello all, I am Balakitesh Pandey. I come from Coventry University, UK. Thanks.
Shrey, do you want to continue?
Hello, I'm Shrey. I am currently an intern here.
Prateek?
Hello, I am Prateek.
I am a software developer in C-DEP.
So Prateek is also the architect of the India Policy Review Portal, which will be released today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anushka. I lead the digital cell in FIDA.
I am Sridhar. I work in the Trade Remedy cell in C-DEP.
Hi, my name is Gayatri and I'm currently working in consulting.
Hello, my name is Kashika Arora. I am PhD. I'm working as a senior research fellow at Center for Government Studies.
Hi, I am Karim Kuchu. I am from Center for WTO Studies and I am one of the co-authors of the reports that were released. Thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Manmeet. I work as a policy analyst at C-DEP Research.
Manoj?
Hi, I'm Manoj. I lead the trade policy vertical at C-DEP. Thank you so much.
Thank you. With that, I request Sri Suresh Gupta to come over here to be felicitated. Sir. Thank you. Another one. So the sticker is missing. That's why. Thank you so much. The reason we don't give bouquets is because the plant stays for longer. As simple as that. Over.
Good morning to you all. Thank you, Mr. Jayjeet, for your invitation to me to come and be part of today's program. Mezzanal Mr. Dhruv Katoj, Preetam Banerjee, representatives of industry associations, researchers, members of academia, ladies and gentlemen. So, today we are talking about logistics, and I had a first-hand experience while coming to the venue this morning. I reached, as promised, I reached IIT gate number 1 by 10:20, and then I was redirected to gate number 3, and that took me another 15 minutes. And I was just wondering whether I would be late. And then when I heard that there are regions which are resulting in delay for everybody, then I was quietly relaxed. I'm not the only one who will be reaching there. Let me, I'm a journalist, so I'll just give you my macro views on these issues related to logistics and supply chain management. You know, in later part of 1990s, I was working with the Department of Food, Government of India. And I always used to wonder, our food grain production is 200 and those days 240 million tons, and why do we carry a buffer stock of 60 million tons? Maybe a smaller quantity because carrying cost was too high. But then we had the memories of 1960s when this country faced a lot of difficulties, starvation, humiliation, while begging for food from Western countries, especially America. And to feed such a large population, we had no choice but to have a resilient food security policy. Then we had the experience of Corona 6 years back. And that is the time when we all started realizing how interconnected the whole world is and how disruption of supplies, whether within the country or internationally, can result difficulties even in areas which may not be connected directly with a particular situation happening in a particular region. So, we have seen COVID, and thereafter, of course, we are seeing the disruption that is being caused by political unrest, which is creating logistical challenges for our country on many fronts, for many industries. This developing situation is posing challenges, but at the same time, it provides us an opportunity also. And the initiatives that have been taken in recent past, namely Make in India, PLI scheme, etc. So that is resulting in some strength for the domestic industry. But supply chain is not restricted to industry alone. It requires it's not just about factories. It requires a complete ecosystem which would include job creation, MSME, infrastructure, and of course skilling of the manpower. So the focus now seems to be shifting from the efficiency, that is cost efficiency, to resilience. Our system should have resilience to face the challenges, unexpected challenges that might come up anytime. So localization to a significant degree, which results in risk mitigation, is the key. Maybe 100% as far as key industries are concerned, we may not be able to have a situation where 100% localization is possible, but to a degree which gives us resilience, to a degree which gives us some time to tide over the temporary challenges. This requires partnership between industry and government, partnership between states and the center, and we need to have proactive policies which should create in a more effective skill development infrastructure, ease of doing business, and of course provision of land, provision of power, law and order situation as far as the state government contribution to this situation is concerned. The reports that are being launched today, these reports I've not been able to have a look at these reports, but I gather that these reports are very, very specific to particular industries, and industry representatives are there. So I welcome these efforts on the part of WTO Center and C-DEP, and these reports are timely, and I am confident that these reports will result in some practical, doable, implementable initiatives, roadmap that will be provided by these reports will actually result in some positive, concrete movement on ground. We all know that India as a country, we have a lot of strengths, we have the skill, and we have talent pool. All that we need is that we have right policies and proper execution, and for that the support of everybody, including the industry, academia, policymakers, is required. So with these views, I thank you all once again for being present here and also listening to my views on the subject. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shri Gupta. As I was sitting and listening to Shri Gupta, the thought that came to my mind is C-DEP fought for a chemical which was called KDQ.
STB and
KTB, sorry, KTB and STB. KTB stands for potassium
tertiary butoxide.
Tertiary butoxide. Even now I struggle to figure out what the name stands for. And why did we focus on it? Something very small. The market is maybe 40 crore, 50 crore is the total sales. In a large economy, it's a it's a rounding of error. And the reason we started looking into it is we saw that the Chinese are desperately dumping KTB into the market, finishing off whoever is manufacturing it. But typically we find the Chinese dumping when it's a large market. Why would you fight so much to get a small market of 40-50 crores, which is nothing? They're burning 10 crores to get a 40-50 crore market. As you all know, dumping basically means that they're selling it at a much lower price in India than in their home market. So why would they do that? Why would they incur a cost? And then we figure out who's manufacturing it. We reached out to the manufacturer and we asked, there's dumping going on, so how are you going to react? Does it bother you? Said, no, we've got many other lines, I'll stop it. But by the way, this chemical was created by DRDO. And in the older times, it was only US which had the technology. They made the chemical, and then and it took them quite some time to figure out how to make KTB. And then they handed it over to my father, who was from IIT Kharagpur, and he started the company in my name. And then her father had passed out, she had come back, so she was basically running the company, which was on her name, and she said, well, I've got other lines to work on, I can't break my head on this particular chemical, anyway it's a small part of the business. I said, well, that's not fair. I mean, there are a lot of red alarms that went off. Why did DRDO manufacture it? Why is China dumping it? What will happen if this particular company stops manufacturing KTB? What are the repercussions? Who are using it? And it turns out that without KTP, our submarines can't work, our Tejas airplanes can't fly, our fighter planes can't fly, and so on and so forth. So that is what supply chain resilience is. And why is it that they can't fly? Because KTP releases oxygen. Without that, your submarines can't go down. It provides the emergency oxygen that is needed. Same in the cockpits, same in many military applications. So the Chinese were dumping it to finish off the Indian capacity, to finish off the American capacity, and make sure that the supply chain, that the military supply chain is dependent on China for a small thing like 50 crore rupees market of KTP. Same as what happened with rare earth. What is it that the hit that China took by stopping supply of rare earth alloys? Hardly $100-200 million. The impact on US was $2 trillion. Impact in India was also very, very significant. And that is what asymmetry of supply chain is, and that's what supply chain resilience is all about, and which is why CWS and C-DEP got together to create these series of reports so that our supply chains are protected, our military, industrial, and military civilian complex is protected. Subsequently, we have worked with various agencies within the country at the highest of levels to find out where India has leverage. And I'm proud to say that we have had, in fact, a similar conference here, a similar roundtable here, to push for that change, and I'm glad to announce that that change has happened. India has taken the steps. I got a threat call from the US Embassy once that happened. They knew who had done it. Pritam knows what I'm talking about. And we have been able to establish a leverage for India also. So not only are we supposed to protect our supply chains, which we are right now quite bad at, but also ensure that we are part of the global supply chain where we can threaten others. And that's really the purpose of these series of roundtables and the series of report initiatives that CWS has taken forward. With that, I'll request our distinguished guest, Major General Katoch and Dr. Pritam Banerjee to come here and be facilitated. I'll request Major General Katoch to come first and then Dr. Pritam Banerjee. Sir, please. Thank you. Dr. Pritam. Thank you. Thank you. So Pritam, since there is no free lunch, we would request you to share your thoughts on the series that you've started.
My pleasure. And
Do you want to find the people?
yeah, I think I just take a couple of minutes to kind of give the context behind why we started this in Center for WTO Studies, and then my colleagues who are also co-authors for this report, Dr. Kashika Arora and Dr. Kayum Khaju, will take over. So essentially, some of you would recall in the prior US administration, when President Biden was there, we had this initiative called the IPEF, for the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum for Cooperation. One of the 4 pillars of the IPEF was the supply chain pillar. It was in fact the only pillar to which India formally participated in. The idea was to, at that time, post-pandemic, create a supply chain that we know there's one particular country which dominates almost. If you look at the global industrial classification of the UN, which is the ISIC, there are 66 manufacturing sectors. In 56 of the 66, China has at least 25% share of output, not trade. And then that means at least in many of those sectors is far beyond 60-70%. So the kind of dominance that China has across multiple sectors is tremendous. So the idea was that we are all dependent and rather vulnerable. The pandemic had showed that. So these countries, the 4 countries that have come together as part of the IPEF to create alternative supply chains. As a part of that work, Center for WTO Studies was basically asked to. So every country in the IPEF was coming up with their list of vulnerabilities, and the focus was China. So you basically look at China, right? What is our import dependence across different products, and then identify which of those products are things that your economy or your security or your food security needs cannot live without. So exactly what Jayjit was mentioning. So we tried to do that exercise. We partnered with CII, and we came up with a list of about 100 or 50 or 150 odd products where we had very significant vulnerability on China. But at the center, we felt that this was not enough, because it was just the first step to identify where I am import dependent on China. But what beyond that? What about my domestic capabilities? And to even go down to the level of a very specific product like Jayjit was mentioning, and try and understand its significance. Because sometimes the numbers don't tell the full story, as was being mentioned in the example. Probably my imports of that specific product is less than $30-40 million. So if we just do a desktop analysis, the radar will miss that as a vulnerability. So that's when we thought about deep diving into very specific products. And we are not specialists and experts. We are not engineers or product industrial supply chain experts. So we have to go to those partners who can help us. And I have known Jayjit for a long time, so it was a natural fit, because he has been doing some very good work. So the partnership evolves from that. I'll stop there. I think my 2 colleagues will give you an overview of the industry supply chain series that we started in the center, and then I think colleagues from C-DEP will also talk about the specific reports. So thank you very much.
So good morning to all the distinguished guests. So today I am very much pleased to present the overview of the foundational framework, analytical methodology and strategic objectives driving our industrial supply chain series published by the Center for WTO Studies. So we are currently operating in an era of hyper fragmented global value chains with sharp and frequent geopolitical shocks. So in this volatile economic environment, analyzing trade vulnerabilities is no longer just an academic exercise, but a core national security and economic imperative. So for years, the trade policy relied heavily on aggregate trade statistics, which inherently hid structural weaknesses and single points of failures in the production lines. So this industrial supply chain series, it bridges the institutional gap with factory floor realities. And this granular focus serves as a vital defense guarding our domestic manufacturing against foreign overcapacities while securing long-term self-resilience. So our core mandate is clear that we had to map out the critical supply chains and strategic intermediates across key industrial sectors by identifying hidden geographic choke points, single origin dependency risks and domestic production deficits, quietly eroding India's export competitiveness. So the next slide. So this provides you the methodological backbone where our reports, they provide the policy level teeth wherein they bridge the gap between the global macro shifts and domestic manufacturing realities. So every report in this series is built on highly rigorous trade data framework of our 4 distinct pillars. So first we have, the first pillar is we map the global trade pattern where we track the international trade flows, where we see the dynamics of trade, and we evaluate exactly where the pressure points originate. Second, we have our strategic value chain positioning, where we see where India sits in the GVC architecture, and evaluating our role as an exporter, building scale, and a volume input importer. Third is our core quantitative multi-dimensional risk matrix, which spans through 4 key metrics. So first is your import dependence, where we see how much exactly we are dependent. Our domestic consumption relies on foreign sourcing. Then we have our sourcing concentration, where we track the combined market share of top supplying nations to reveal the single origin liabilities, that is the risk that we are having. Then we have the domestic production, where we utilize the annual survey of industries database. Then we have our consumption balances, where we check the real-time domestic market demand against our active domestic factory outputs. And fourth is that we do the sectoral deep dives, where we zoom into our strategic sectors to identify product level vulnerabilities. Then third slide would show you the collaborative network. Is that so when we did all of this work, we realized that the true industrial resilience cannot be mapped accurately inside an academic silo. So therefore, this series has successfully scaled into a powerful multi-stakeholder network, bringing together diverse institutional competencies. So first, we have the Center for WTO Studies, which provides the crucial policy insight and industrial resilience mapping. Then we have C-DEP, where they provide the foundational trade knowledge and empirical trade diagnostics. And then we also consulted EEPCs for our reports, where EEPC is your Engineering Export Promotion Council, which provides the factory floor realities and direct engineering exporter insights. And also we have consulted other industry bodies, which have ensured in providing insights reflecting the manufacturing dynamics of the country. So ultimately, the goal of Industrial Supply Chain series has been to start a critical dialogue on 3 fronts. So first is your upstream supply and material security, where we provide the empirical backing needed to drive structural diversification away from highly concentrated foreign input nodes towards the alternative options and domestic sourcing. And then second, we want to have an active institutional bridge between MSMEs, linking downstream MSMEs and upstream core manufacturers, export promotion councils, and other government policy divisions. And thirdly, we saw a strategic shift in one of our policy briefs. We discovered that the domestic capability, that the imports, they are not just driven by tariff incentives, but by domestic capability gaps. And therefore, we need a simple, we need to shift away from simple tariff calibration towards capability-based measures. So by focusing on heavily on technological partnerships, joint manufacturing agreements, and targeted investments in domestic production infrastructure. So with this, I hand over the presentation of the key findings to the C-DEP team.
No, thank you, and for the overview. Just to simplify, because many people in this room are not economists, let me put again, borrowing from a war scenario, but which is factual, is that, see, why do people engage in war? To be able to dominate the other country's economy at the end of the day, right? That's why wars happen. One of the ways when, let's say, Ukraine and Russia fought, the first thing Russia did was put bombs on Ukraine's factories, and destroys the ability of Ukraine to manufacture. Now, if you can do the same thing without throwing bombs, that's far more efficient. And that's what we see in terms of the supply chain resilience issues. That I will bring the price down by 5% compared to what the local manufacturing is. I've bombed the factory effectively, it's out. The KTB manufacturing could have been out. And so what does Atmanirbhar Bharat really mean? What does resilience really mean? It doesn't mean that we are going to manufacture everything in the backyard of IT Delhi in Jia Sarai. No. It means that the will of the government needs to be imposed on the supply chain. The supply chain may be in India, the supply chain may not be in India. The point is that if it's not in India, can we force the manufacturers to supply as and when India wants? To give you another example as to what happened during COVID was that even though factories in China were owned by the Germans and the French and so on as COVID hit, the Chinese government said that you cannot evacuate the products from your factory to your home country, they have to stay in China. And so there was no German government will on their own factories in China. And what's the other way around? I mean, because as Dr. Preetham Banerjee mentioned, we cannot manufacture everything here. So what do? We need to make sure that there are multiple sources and suppliers elsewhere. So if one supplier plays truant, we can get it from some other supplier. For example, we don't have crude oil in this country, right? We don't have it. So if one supplier is not able to supply or not willing to supply or for any other reason, we quickly went and got other suppliers in place. And that is what resilience is. Now we can't do it on a emergency mode every single time. We can't work on crisis mode every single time. So what Dr. Preetham Banerjee and CWS has taken up is that how can we plan in advance so that we do not operate in a crisis mode. I mean, fertilizer, sir, it was going to get completely impacted because of the war in Iran, right? And I look forward to hearing more from you because natural gas will stop coming. Without natural gas, you cannot have ammonium-based fertilizers, and that impacts our food security. Imagine a war somewhere far away is impacting our food security, because these are the dots that needs to be linked, and those are the dots that CWS initiative is trying to link. With that, I would request our chief guest, Sri Gupta, Dr. Preetham Banerjee, General Katos, to come over here, along with the key authors to release each of the reports. First is author for nylon filament yarn, which was championed by Sri-DEP. Sri-DEP has just flown in from Hyderabad. I kind of forgot about it completely because I'm so familiar to seeing him here all the time. Please come over here and present. Kayu. Yes. Manoj. Come this way. And who's in the picture? You're in the picture, right? So we'll look at this camera first and then at that camera, right? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Well, there are 3 more reports to release, so we can leave them here. All of them were released. Oh, so all of them were released at one go. They are mix and match. The time crunch to release all the.
Oh, wonderful. That's very good logistics.
That's good supply chain.
Efficient.
Thank you for that. And with that, I request Sri-DEP to talk about the supply chain resilience of nylon filament yarn, and then we'll go one by one on that. Sri-DEP, you want to come here? Yeah.
So, okay, still morning. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity. Firstly, a bit of a context setting. We are starting with the textiles product. Textiles industry is very important for India because we have 45 million Indians working in this sector. So it's fair to start with this product. It's the second largest employer in this country after agriculture. We are specifically talking about nylon filament yarn. because there is this shift towards man-made fibers. Globally, India is actually lagging behind. And as cotton production in India stagnates, we were actually surplus in cotton about 3 or 4 years ago, but now we are importing cotton and the cotton bill is increasing every year. So there is an imperative need for India to start producing and shifting towards man-made fibers. Within that context, we have chosen nylon filament yarn as our first product. So India is the world's largest importer of nylon filament yarn. It's the second biggest market for NFI, obviously after China. Now, to speak about market sizes, we are projected to reach about 30,000 INR by 2030, which is significant. And we have about 50,000 workers in tier 2 and tier 3 cities of Gujarat, Surat, Madhya Pradesh, people who have for generations worked on NFI production, which is why these are the small dots that Jay sir was talking about. So this is positioned to grow into a 30,000 crore industry by 2030. And we are growing at an average of 8% CAGR every year. Next slide, please. Now, this is used widely in several downstream products. Specifically, what stands out is that its application in defense and paramilitary. NFI is particularly important because of its durability and strength as opposed to other textile products, which is why the application in defense and paramilitary, such as parachutes and military harness systems, is very important. So supply chain resilience in NFI is not just about textiles resilience, but also it becomes a crucial part in defense supply chain resilience, which is again why we were motivated to pick this product. Next slide. So again, a central theme, as Dr. Preetham also mentioned, the China overcapacity. Just to put in context, India's demand for NFI today, as we speak, 2025-26, is about 2 lakh metric ton. China's capacity is about 60 lakh metric ton. So China's demand in itself is 33 lakh, so they are a huge consumer of NFI, but they have 27 to 30 lakh metric tons of overcapacity. That is about 15 to 17 times India's current demand. And again, reminding you that India is the second largest market. So they have 15 to 17 times the capacity for the second largest market. Now, why this is important is again that once these capacities are met, and industry sources confirm that China is continuously aggressively increasing capacities, despite having such an overhang in capacities. So obviously, once they have that capacity, they have to keep the factories running, and they are compelled to sell at whatever price in the export markets. The next slide, we'll have a clue about what is the price trend. This defies inflation, especially with what's happening in the last 5 years with COVID, with the Russia-Ukraine war, and now the Middle East war. There is no sense of inflation in this, and the domestic industry has to procure caprolactam and other upstream raw materials at international markets, but for some reason, Chinese NFI landed price in India has been reducing consistently from 2005 to now 20 years. And this table is important because the conversion cost from procuring a nylon chip to making nylon yarn for domestic producers who are very competitive will take about $1.2 to $1.25, but for China, based on their landed price, about $0.35, which in itself says that the unit economics don't add up. And there is a deliberate strategy to dump in India. Next slide. So now we can see that the differentiated pricing, this clearly shows their strategy and strategic intent to capture the Indian market. India they're selling it at 2.36, this is based on the latest pricing. But if you see the third largest, which is the Brazilian market for NFI, Korea, Turkey and Vietnam is about 3 to 4.3 USD per kg. So clearly they want to sell at a lower price, even though there could be an argument made that India is closest to China, but that can be made for Vietnam as well and Korea as well. So clearly their intention is to capture the Indian market, and India is the largest, fastest growing NFI market in the world currently. DGTR, Director General of Trade Remedies, Ministry of Commerce, have confirmed time and again in 2018, and even the latest final findings that the Chinese producers, on an average, are dumping at 55%, and Vietnam also are partaking in this practice, following China at 150%. But at the same time, what's important is that they're selling at 20.31 per kg in Italy, which has no capacity for NFI. So clearly, once India loses its capacity, we are looking at a price at $20 per kg immediately, right? Because Italy doesn't have much of a capacity, and they're consuming NFI. Brazil has not a modest capacity when compared to India, but definitely they have production capacity. And these pricing is correlated to the capacity, and they want to finish off capacity so that once the capacities are done, what we've seen with penicillin G, they will shoot up the prices once the capacities are over. So another important point is about the importance of trade remedies to give level playing field for domestic manufacturers. Before a bit of a context, 2006 to 2018, there was anti-dumping duties on Chinese imports levied in India. And we can see that the Chinese market share in India was less than 1%. 2018, the request for sunset review was lapsed, and immediately within 7 years, we can see that 88% of India's imports are from China. And next. Not only that, 49% of China's exports are to India, which is massive, given that they have 60 lakh tons of produce. They are focused on India. They want to send 50% of the production of their exports to India, which goes to show again that their intent to capture the Indian market. And we can see like the shoot up, even you can see the 2018 one also. There's a significant surge in imports of NFI into India. These are some of the companies. These are major companies. They have, again, multiple lines. These were viable producers of NFI until 2018 who shut operations. These are public figures that we were able to obtain. This in itself is 30,000 MT, metric tons of NFI production capacity. That was 30,000 metric tons of production capacity that was officially closed. And these are some of the companies in Gujarat that we weren't able to find the official capacity. Of course, these are larger companies and they have multiple products. But these are the NFI products that they had to stop because of a significant dumping. Not only this, we have in the present capacities, there are about 37,000 metric tons of idle capacity out of these. Not only these, even the present players, about 40,000 metric tons are lying waste because of extensive dumping, which are soon to be NPAs if the government does not provide any sort of policy support. This is in terms of supply chain resilience. A brief about how nylon chip, very simply, crudely speaking, we import caprolactam. India is majorly import dependent on caprolactam. We don't have much of a capacity. It's barely 120,000 metric tons. And 74.5% caprolactam is from China. Then we also import nylon chips, which is about 70% import dependent on China. And then again, as I just mentioned, NFI is also 88% of the imports are from China. So we can clearly see that China is dominating the entire value chain of NFI. And domestic producers are not only squeezed from the bottom in their own product, but also caprolactam, because they have to wage with China, because they have the power to start selling at a higher price or a lower price. For example, in the recent war, the prices of caprolactam have shot up by 50%, and the domestic producers had to absorb it. Okay, quickly moving to the policy options. One is Director General of Trade Remedies does a fantastic job looking into multiple stakeholders, even the exporters from China, Vietnam, and forming a fair selling price. Regardless of the anti-dumping duties being implemented, the investigation itself is an asset to the government, is my personal opinion, because we have a fair selling price that has been established. Then there's another angle of QCOs. The reason why China and Vietnam are able to sell at such a low price is because they sell 65 to 70%, as per DGTR's findings, are non-prime, non-grade prime textiles. I forget the correct technical term. Essentially, products that the Indian producers cannot produce under BIS standards. So not only are they incurring the cost to produce high quality products, but they are being out competed by incompetent and inferior quality products. That is point number 2. Point number 3 is that we have to address the upstream raw material shortages in caprolactam. There's a 2.5% BCD on caprolactam and extremely difficult to procure, especially given the Middle Eastern war. If we want to promote domestic manufacturing of NFI in this country, raw material access, upstream raw material access has to be made easier, could be made easier. And then of course, there's this 4th point, that there's a series of non-implementation of trade remedies for upstream manufactured nylon filament yarn, anti-dumping duties getting lapsed, QCO being reinstated. But at the same time, the downstream players of nylon filament yarn, that is specifically apparel fabric, are protected with 20% BCD. So there is clearly a need to relook at rationalizing the duty structure if you want to promote manufacturing in the upstream sector. And of course, there's a GST issue also, that there are higher GSTs on upstream raw materials as opposed to the fabric, where caprolactam and NFI are taxed higher, whereas the fabric and the apparel and the downstream are taxed lower, which is leading to an inverted GST structure in the nylon filament yarn sector. That's it.
Thank you.
So the next product we're going to talk about
just
is...
take 30 seconds to explain. Why don't you explain the fact that what Sridhar was talking about of sourcing from Vietnam, that much of it is from China actually. So we can just talk about that and explain that in every single case that's what's happening, right? Instead of China sending it, they're sending it through Indonesia, Vietnam, and so on. So let me take that for 2 seconds for everybody to understand. So what is happening is that because the world understood China's game, so they started putting in barriers for China. What China did, specifically in the case of India, is that they turned to supplying materials through Vietnam, Indonesia, and others, rather than sending it directly from China. So some of the numbers that you see is coming from Vietnam is actually Chinese, and that's facilitated through the India-ASEAN trade agreement, which is a free trade agreement. So freely they're coming in without any duties being imposed on it. So not only are they routing it through a third country, but also they're bypassing all the custom duties that needs to be imposed. So there is multiple nuances to the trade that we're talking about. I'm just simplifying the situation, but these are complexities that are coming up in our dealing with China. In fact, every time we're talking about supply chain resilience and what Dr. Preetham Banerjee talked about, which is the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, all of it is actually focused on China coming out as a dominant player, misusing the WTO regulations, misusing the trade framework, and kind of busting it from inside. So they enter WTO like a camel into a tent, and then they bust the tent. So we are trying to create these layers of protection in that sense. If you follow the Financial Times newspaper, which is a UK newspaper, it quotes that between 2024 and 2025, the rate of capacity destruction of chemical manufacturing in Europe doubled compared to the previous year. Volkswagen is firing 100,000 of its 600,000 employees because it can't stand up to the competition from Chinese cars, and so on and so forth. So are we moving towards an era where 16% of global population will be under another 16% of the global population? It is quite interesting to note that right in the 1950s, China identified India as its major adversary, and not US, not UK, not any other country, because it just played fast forwarded the clock and said in 50 to 100 years time, it will be India which will be a dominant force, and therefore they started targeting India at a very, very early stage. Of course, we gave away Tibet, we gave them logistical support through the Kolkata port to take over Tibet. Not only did we just give it to the plateau, we actually gave them logistical support. So we actually have blood in our hand of all the killings that happened in Tibet. So digressing a bit, but just giving you the larger perspective as to what's going on and how to read into some of the dry numbers that are being projected. There is a history behind all those dry numbers, and there is a future to it if you don't take the steps right now.
I just had 10 seconds. So, what you were mentioning, Rajit, part of that also starts with the first Trump administration, because the first Trump administration brought a huge number of tariffs on the Chinese, and that was a major market for them. So they started shifting production to two locations, Mexico and Vietnam. So part of that is that. Second is, as more and more countries come up with protectionism on Chinese exports, the overcapacities that you see will be more amenable to dumping. So we will be much more vulnerable as we go if we are not careful. So I just wanted to bring those 2 points.
Yeah, when I can foresee 10 years later somebody saying, well, Jayajit and Preetham were sitting and did nothing. and the Chinese are now dominating us. So we need to take steps now. In fact, to the point what Dr. Preetham Banerjee was talking about, that 2017, Trump put in the tariffs on China. What was the result? The imports from China to India shot up by, if I remember, 26 to 27%. Every time there has been China needed exports to happen, we have opened up our doors. So next was 2020, post-COVID. We started cancelling all the anti-dumping duties and we welcome Chinese products. Why, we don't know. 2025 February, again tariffs were put in by the US government on China. Again, India started cancelling its anti-dumping duties and welcomed Chinese imports. In each of these times, the import bump from China went up by a minimum of 20%, which is why we have $110 billion of excess imports coming in from China. So the trade deficit between China and us is $110 billion, which is larger than many of the GDPs of many countries. That's the trade deficit we have. And the problem is that either we are in a virtuous cycle or a vicious cycle. Please keep this in mind. What does it mean? If you are in a virtuous cycle like what China is, because you've got more factories, your supply chain becomes better, your per unit cost becomes better, your economy of scale becomes better, and therefore you're able to beat anyone. You take away all the crutches from the Chinese government, the Chinese industry is now on its own quite competitive, very, very competitive. A vicious cycle is that you let one factory close down, another will close down, the trucking cost will go up, the per unit electricity cost will go up, the port charges will go up, your cost will become higher and higher, and so you'll never be able to compete. So that's the vicious cycle. It will keep going down and down. We need to dig in our heels and say no more. Unfortunately, at least I don't hear it. I don't know whether you have been hearing it. We have been hearing the right noises. We have not been seeing those actions on the ground. Obviously, the Center for WTO Studies is affiliated with Ministry of Commerce. Ministry of Commerce has been trying its best, but it's not just one ministry. That is the government. The government is a much larger element. It's the central government, state government, Panchayati Raj, and 40 departments in each of these governments, 40 in the state, 40 in the central, and so on and so forth. So it gets very, very debilitating.
So the second product that we have is PET resin. So PET resin is a primary feedstock for our packaging industry. So their upstream feedstocks are PT and MAG, and they go through a polymerization, and then they get converted into PET resin. And 92% of PET resins that then gets converted into PET bottles. And then we can see here the distribution of PET bottles. 31% goes into bottled water, 20% goes into fruit drinks and soft drinks, then personal care, followed by liquor and pharmaceuticals. If we look at the export market distribution, then we see that China has a commanding share of 35% and India has 3% share in the global exports. And not only just commanding share, the Chinese exports have been rising from 2017 to 2023. They have been risen at the rate of 111%. And moving to the next slide. So talking of global capacities, we see that China again has 46% of the global capacities and India has 6%. So China's capacity, China has 10,903 kilotons of excess capacity, which translates into 5 times the demand of India. We see that India's domestic demand is 2.4 million metric ton per annum, India's domestic capacity is 2.4 million metric ton per annum, and India's PET demand is 1.92 million metric ton per annum. At a glance, it may be understood that we have overcapacity at the moment, but if we see at the growth projections, India's PET demand is growing at the rate of 12 to 14% annually, and it's projected to reach 3.79 million metric ton by 2030. So even before 2030, we will have a huge shortage of PET resin in India if we don't put in the sufficient investments today. But that is not happening because of the level of excess capacity that China has. China's surplus accounts for 87% of the world surplus. Moving on. So, in response to China's overcapacity and the dumping it has been doing, US has already put trade remedies in force since October 2015. Here we can see that in 2015, investigation initiated, which was followed by preliminary duty, and then after the duty got imposed, the imports were negligible. It is important to note here that these imports are the imports at fair prices. Anti-dumping duty just addresses the unfair imports. So these are the imports that are happening now, and the similar case in EU, the import surge, and then duty. When the duty got expired, then the import surge, and after the initiation and duty reimposition, then the imports came to the normal values. So US is closed for PET resin. EU has also closed its door for PET resin for unfair dumping of PET resin. And globally, 10 plus jurisdiction has acted upon and put appropriate trade remedies on Chinese dumping. So India becomes the primary dumping ground after all the major markets are closed. So here are some policy interventions. First is we have to continue anti-dumping duties whenever DGTR puts a recommendation. We should rationalize port and logistic cost to maintain the competitiveness of domestic industry. We should support downstream MSMEs, facilitate export growth, and build alternative feedstock initiatives. Or we should build feedstock independence, develop coal to PX or other routes to produce the feedstock for PET resin. The third product is viscose stable fiber. Coming back to the textiles. Next slide. VSF is a man-made cellulosic fiber. It is industrially produced but cellulose based like cotton. So just to put VSF in the textile universe, so the fiber are major in two categories. So first is natural fibers and man-made fibers. Natural fibers contain cotton, wool, silk, as we all know, and VSF sits under the category of man-made cellulosic fibers. By properties, it is very close to the cotton, and it is often blended with cotton to produce textiles. VSF is produced from wood pulp, so it is regenerated from wood-based dissolving pulp and cut into staple fibers for spinning into yarn. So if you look at consumption capacities, it has been growing, and always in India capacity has remained above the consumption. And if you look at the capacity share worldwide, China has 66% share, India has 10% share, and followed by Indonesia, which has similar share of 10%. If we move further, we see that here is a contrasting thing. In share of global exports, we see Indonesia is leading at 46%, followed by China, Thailand, India, and others. India has same level of capacity to that of Indonesia, but still Indonesia has 46% share in global exports. And not only that, its export has been also rising, and in past 9 years it has nearly tripled. Why is it happening? That we can see in the next slide. It is because there are two primary reasons. First is export obligations, which are faced by Indonesian producers, and second is that their access to low cost wood pulp. That is the primary feedstock to produce VSF, viscose staple fiber. Then the other thing is the low cost wood pulp is coming from contributing to deforestation in that area. And due to this particular reason, the Forest Stewardship Council, which globally set the standard for responsible foresting, has disassociated itself from several Indonesian producers over concerns regarding deforestation. So export obligation coupled with the cheap access to non-certified wood pulp resulted in Indonesia being the largest exporter.
Let's just go back because just want to explain that the issue is that if there is an Indian producer of viscose filament yarn, viscose staple fiber, they can only take FSC wood pulp, right? So they have to pay more, and there is a duty on it because they'll get it from Canada or from South Africa. Whereas if you look at the Indonesian VSF exporters, they take their local their local produce, which is not FSC certified, right? But if India takes the same pulp, first of all, the pulp is not being sold to India. But if India takes the same pulp, then they can't sell their end garments into European and US market. So that's the issue. So we are stuck between a hard rock and a mountain. Right. Back to you.
Next slide, please. So, Indonesia has non-certified pulp and it faces lower compliance and it has no traceability when it comes to EU and US standard checks. Whereas Indian producers source it from responsible producers who are not contributing to deforestation. We have FSC certified pulp and we hence face higher compliance cost. Next slide. So here the next challenge is inverted duty and inverted GST structure, as Dr. Bhattacharya had mentioned. In India, we can't produce RJWB because of the climatic conditions, so we have to import it, and when we import it, we face 2.5% BCD, but the finished VSF is coming at 0% duty, which creates an inverted duty structure. Similarly, an inverted GST structure also exists. There is a 18% GST on the raw material, but finished VSF has 5% GST. So this GST alone is 1,200 crores of working capital being blocked in input tax credit. So QCO also got removed in 2025. ADD also got lapsed. So that's why we see this import surge happening.
So sorry, this 2025 is a watershed year again. And just connected back to what I was saying. The US started putting duties on China, and so wherever Chinese investments are, they from 2025 onwards got a free pass into India. So QCOs got cancelled, ADDs got cancelled, every single trade safeguard that India had has been brought down the moment China needed exports. You'll see this in every single product, 2025. There is one in 2017, then in 2020, and then now in 2025.
Next, please. So here are policy interventions. First and second are to correct the inverted duty structure that we have. Is to bring BCD on RTWP to 0, and we have to move VSF into the negative list so that we don't have 0% BCD on the finished product. And the third recommendation is to correct inverted GST structure. Then we have to similarly as per resin, we have to impose anti-dumping duty whenever it is being recommended. And fifth, we have to improve our sustainability standards up to the mark of even years. That's from my side. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much for the colleagues to setting up the context, and thank you Dr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Preetham for setting up the overall context of what we are trying to achieve here. So now we move to the next topic, optical fiber cable. Unlike the first three products, this is the product which probably none of us might have never seen or never heard of because it's not visible. Can you move to the next slide? So every gigabyte of AI computation, every 5G tower, every rural broadband connection, everything runs on a strand of glass which is thinner than human hair, and that's the optical fiber for you. And so why does this matter? Optical fiber cables replaces the old network of copper-based communication system, which means these new cables are bend-proof, they can be laid underground, and they have low attenuation and low signal loss, which increases the efficiency. So that moves to the next point. So this is the feeder and enabler of all of our 5G broadband connections, FTT broadband, and the new data centers initiatives which our government is taking up. So this forms all of the industrial backbone and it supports all of the government initiatives in this ecosystem. And more than that, it functions as a strategic digital infrastructure, even though largely you might have probably never seen it with the naked eye. And the best part of this particular product is India is one of the very few limited countries which has end-to-end capacity. Starting from preform to fiber drawing to cable assembly, India can do all of this in-house. But that being said, there is a caveat here. Like all the other supply chain series which we have been watching, here the key input is it moves from glass, preform, and preform is drawn into fiber drawing, and again fiber drawing converted into cables, and finally it moves to deployment stage where it is used for all this multiple, including defense, data centers, 5G. And if you look at the global market outlook, it is pegged at USD 13 billion, and the CAGR is of 10.4%. And a little bit of Indian context, recently in the latest budget, our Department of Telecom has allotted 73,000 crores for the telecom project, under which 20,000 crores is specifically allotted for BharatNet project. So this tells you that India has very deep ambitions in this particular area, and we are heavily invested in. Can you move to the next? But however, this is the caveat, right? So everything, the input materials, all of it, like the theme of this flavor is dependency on China. So that is a recurring theme even in this. Starting from raw materials like high purity silica, which is used for dopants, and again germanium tetrachloride is a dopant, silicon tetrachloride, chlorine, all of this is used. So these raw materials are used to increase the refractive index. So in optical fiber, for light signal to transform, this is the key enabler for this all of the technology to function, and this is where China is choking us. So moving to the next point, it is used in chemical vapor deposition, and again fiber drawing, and here we need helium, UV resin, coloring ink, and then we move to the cable assembly where we have key assembly materials such as aramidon, FRP rod, and water blocking material to make it waterproof so that it doesn't get impacted even though they are underground. One, we need to note that once the cable is laid down here, it is humanly impossible to start a revamping project. So the quality of the cables which are being laid is of utmost quality. So the strength of India's OFC lies in our end-to-end capacity, but its main vulnerability lies in the critical inputs, the access to all of this, germanium tetrachloride, silicon tetrachloride, and chlorine, out of which again China has 80% of this monopoly. No other country has options of germanium. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll just go and double click on the first part on germanium tetrachloride, and we have somebody from the industry, Parijat, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. So we basically have the capability to pick up sand and then convert that into optical fiber cable, which is how all of this is getting connected. IIT is getting connected, defense is getting connected, and so on. Now, to do that conversion, you need one particular chemical, which is the germanium tetrachloride that we're talking about. Germanium is a critical mineral, and as we know, China has got a tight control over it. So China has said, and I'm putting it very simplistically, has said that we will not give you germanium tetrachloride. And so there has been hectic conversation going on between the Indian government, the Chinese government, the Indian industry. And what the Chinese are saying, fine, we'll give you germanium tetrachloride, but let our fiber optic also flow in freely into India. Fair deal? Well, it's not fair, obviously, because Chinese optical fiber is heavily subsidized. They'll finish off our capacities. So they put a gun on our head and said, either we let you manufacture optical fiber, which you will not be able to sell because we'll sell ours at a cheaper rate, or we will not let you manufacture fiber optic because we'll not give you germanium tetrachloride. Now, what is the cost of germanium tetrachloride into all the entire optical fiber? I don't know, 1%, 0.5%, maybe nothing.
It's about 3%, you can say, 2 to 3%. Yeah.
In terms of costing?
It's costing is 2 to 3%.
2 to 3% is germanium tetrachloride for the end product. For the
end product, for the cable is 2 to 3%.
So just 2 to 3% is what they are controlling. So China is controlling 2 to 3% of the entire value chain, but they have the ability to finish us off. And that is what supply chain resilience is. I just want to double click on it. And that's again showcases the initiative that you and your institute is taking now.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya, for filling in. So now we move to the strategic gap. So it is established that India has current demand of 18 million fiber kilometers, and it is in 2018 and moved to 32 and now at 40. But the interesting part is, as of now, India already has a capacity to produce 100 fiber kilometer of capacity. However, the constraints are germanium tetrachloride, and access to this raw materials is currently what is holding our Indian ecosystem optical fiber ecosystem to scale up and have their start exporting globally. So starting from the demand pool, there are in India is planning to almost have 7.7 lakh telecom towers, and the fiberization is only 30 to 40%. So the next 5 years, we would see bunch of the 60% of this fiberization towers, which actively requires optical fiber cable. And again, our BharatNet initiatives and digital infrastructure keep the consistently the demand pushing up and up every year. So, and talking about the industrial base, as said, we already have 100 million fiber kilometer production, currently against the domestic annual consumption of 46%. So the rest is, so basically, we are not firing our factories at the full scale because we don't have the access to the raw material. And the demand is less than half of the installed capacity in all the three, and preform fiber drawing cable assembly, and that's how the optical fiber cable is manufactured. And we also, with the help of Center for WTO Studies, we also pulled out the data from ASI database and to see what is the ground level feedback coming from it. So that shows that 30 import dependencies remain stagnant as per ASI, starting from 2022, which was at 35%, and then reduced to 22%, and again 2024 latest it is 33%. This is the X factory output. We need to, I would like to clarify that this ASI, the products, the respondents of this ASI survey would also be producing multiple products. So this can't be directly pegged against optical fiber cable, but it gives a sense of direction of where our industries are going on ground. And moving on to profitability, you can see that losses have been narrowed from 209 crores in 2022 to almost 100 crores in 2024. But still, even though the profits, the losses are narrowing, but still there is a lot of struggle in the bottommost of the industries to survive in this highly competitive field. And moving on to our export profiles, according to the ITC trade map and according to Indian trade map, US is India's largest OFC export corridor, period. So the two large drivers of this is one, already the existing demand of India, and moreover the similar applies for US. However, we will see that how US is safeguarding their own optical fiber cables and how they are supporting them, what we can learn from the current policies and what we can also try to establish in India. So what are the potential policy options here we have? The flavor of the current last couple of years is secure the import supply. If you are dependent on any critical input supply, here in case which is germane tetrachloride, the first option we have, like any other country, is start diversifying your basket. So apart from China, US and Europe, also the industry stakeholders can pitch in here. The other countries which have germane tetrachloride are Europe and USA. So diversify the resources, incentivize the domestic production of key precursors and chemicals. So the aim here should be anything which can be produced in India should be prioritized from all the stages, starting from preform, starting from fiber cable drawing and to optical fiber cable. And the next point what we would like to establish is, of course, that we have been repeatedly talking about a level playing field, whether in terms of QCO or whether in terms of anti-dumping duties. The same applies for optical fiber cable also. China is continuously trying to penetrate into our market and choke our domestic industry players from growing and from scaling up. So act on rapid import surges, stop the unfair trade practices, strengthen domestic quality standards. As I said, once an optical fiber cable is laid, it is humanly impossible, and the economics won't allow India to keep doing this again if there is any faulty ecosystem which is already laid out. So it is better to start using quality products than turning up 10 years later and then starting, okay, we need to fix the cables underground again. And monitor the transshipment, and this is where the transnational subsidies and the circumvention aspect also, which was touched by Dr. Bhattacharya. And so how is USA protecting their optical fiber cable management? So if you are included in this ecosystem, you must have known something about BABA Act, which is Build America, Buy America. India also is doing something similar, which is called PPP, MIF framework, Public Procurement Policy Framework, and Make in India framework. So what does it say? Just prioritize.
Let me explain the BABA Act. I don't think everybody understands. BABA Act, which is Build America, Buy America Act, is the Atmanirbhar America Act. So if you know what Atmanirbhar Bharat is, this is the Atmanirbhar America Act. So everything that is there in India, the same thing is what they are having.
So procurement use the long-term demand. We have the visibility from BharatNet and 5G, railways, power and defense. So start procuring, start giving these procurement priority to our domestic companies which are already scaled up and which are already doing, which has existing capacities to be leveraged upon. Encourage state governments and PSUs to adopt similar standards. And moving on, what else can we do to support the industry in terms of innovation and in terms of R&D? Have a separate grants for supporting optical fiber cables, and enable technology upgradation and scale for Indian manufacturers and develop skill talent. And the last but not the least, expand global market presence. See, India already is sitting on a vast, huge capacity which is not being used. So have the access to the key materials so that we can start producing the 100 fiber kilometers and India can start exporting and lead the way in optical fiber market. And I would like to, before leaving, I would like to focus that now everyone understands how important the data centers are. And without the optical fiber cables, there is no data centers. So there is a newfound importance of supporting this ecosystem, and with that, promote India as a trusted supplier for secure and reliable fiber networks so that we can make in India and sell for globally across. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manoj, Sridhar, and Manmeet for walking us through the papers. We also have 2 more reports that we are releasing today. Okay. We've got a report on MSME sectoral impact and a report on relooking India's institutional framework for anti-dumping duty imposition. And let me give you a little background of both these reports before we release it. The report on MSME sectoral impact is basically everything that you saw for each of the industries. What is the impact happening on MSMEs per se? Because we have been continuously hearing that the anti-dumping duties in India are being taken out to support MSMEs. Whereas what we see in the ground is that MSMEs obviously don't have a voice. Somebody has taken up their voice and stating that they are being harmed. But on the ground we see that the removal of anti-dumping duties and the safeguards provided to them is actually wiping out MSMEs after MSMEs. A bunch of them were shown by Sridhar in the MFI presentation. We are seeing that happening across steel, across multiple sectors. So we have done a little bit of compilation of data. This is data-driven analysis that we have done. And the second is therefore looking at what's going wrong in India. Can we fix the process? And therefore a report on what is the process that needs to be fixed based on how rest of the world is working on. In the rest of the world, it is unprecedented that once dumping is determined, anti-dumping duty is not put. This is unprecedented, this is unheard of. Maybe 1 in 100 cases not put because of certain geopolitical reasons. For example, from 1991 when India liberalized till 2020, there were only 5 cases where after determination of dumping, India did not impose anti-dumping duties because Saudi kind of threatened that if you do this, we'll do this, and so on and so forth. So 5 cases in whatever 30 years that we did not impose, which is less than 1% of the cases. But now, for some reason from 2025 onwards, we see 90% of the anti-dumping duties were being rejected, especially in the last 6-7 months. And that is really wiping off our MSMEs. So it's quite concerning, and therefore we have put these reports together. In the MSME sectoral report, a few large numbers that we have is 2,139 crores of MSME linked investments that are exposed to dumped imports. Then there is 1,749 crores of import substitution of forex savings is possible through existing domestic capacity. So we're not using our domestic capacity and we're importing. And then we are saying, why is our foreign exchange going out? How do we conserve foreign exchange? Can we get NRIs to put their dollars into India? Well, we are importing unnecessarily, and we're importing Chinese on top of it. We're finishing off our industries and we're letting our capacity go idle. And then we are wondering, where is our forex going? So at various levels, it just doesn't make sense as to the kind of policy we've adopted. There's 29,450 metric tons of NFI capacity, which is reportedly shut across 6 units, and which is again coming from the presentation that Sridhar made. Then there is sublimation paper units. 18 sublimation paper units are reportedly shut, 4 more operating under distress. What is sublimation paper? You take the paper, you put the print, and then you print it on clothes. So it's very critical for garment industry. It is completely dominated by MSMEs because it's small investments, small margins, and well, China operates at negative margins. So the Chinese papers are coming in, and these people don't have the voice. You'll find them in the gullies of Surat and so on. They don't even have the capability to take a flight and come to Delhi and put their views forward. There was somebody from the mobile phone back cover industry who were told, अच्छा आप from the government, अच्छा आप बड़ा क्यों नहीं करते हो, इसको और क्यों नहीं करते हो, आप आगे क्यों नहीं बढ़ते हो, आप internationally क्यों नहीं export करते हो? They're saying we'll do all of that. This poor guy is saying, एक बार हमारा रोजी रोटी तो ठीक हो जाए, वो भी हम करेंगे. हमारा 20 लाख के इन्वेस्टमेंट के ऊपर हमारा 20% रिटर्न आता है, तो 4 लाख साल का इनकम होता है. उसमें आप कह रहे हैं कि हम जाके उनसे लड़ ले, पहले हमारा तो आप ठीक कीजिए. So these are the kind of conversations we are hearing. And unfortunately, the same breath we are hearing that to save MSMEs, anti-dumping duties are being removed, which is not adding up. The mobile backgrounds producers' domestic market share fell around 70% to below 20%. NFI recorded an average dumping margin of 67.5%. DASDA, another chemical used for again brightening of clothes and so on, has recorded 25% of dumping margin. The average downstream cost impact of anti-dumping duties across 56 cases only 0.0227%. Again, the argument has been that if you put anti-dumping duty, the inflation will go up. Well, forget about inflation, just the downstream impact is 0.027%, which is hard to even calculate. But those are being taken up as an excuse. 25 MSME Udyan records were verified across the affected sector, and these are all genuine MSMEs. Key affected sectors that we studied was NFI, sublimation paper, mobile covers, DASDA, rubber gloves, fishnets, and vacuum flasks. All of them getting decimated, and you know it's almost white collar crime that's happening when we are finishing off these industries. The report recommends implementing BGTR duties, recognizing MSME injuries, strengthening anti-circumvention monitoring, and consulting affected sectors, especially when we've got AI and we've got the data coming from DGCIS. We should be able to use these numbers, feed them to AI to check at a very, very high frequency whether they are targeting our industries or not. So I'll stop here so that we can release the report. We have the report for releasing, right? We'll release the report. I'll request our chief guest and distinguished guest to please come to the dais and we can release the reports. Manoj, you want to join in? Anyway. So this is a report on MSME sectoral report. Can we get the other slide, please? Anti-dumping framework. This is a report on the institutional framework for anti-dumping duty. Thank you. So based on everything that we have discussed since morning, which is the supply chain initiatives, the impact on MSMEs, what's come out is that we need to relook at the institutional mechanisms that India is adopting for providing safeguards to the domestic industry. which is where we have come out with this last report, which is relooking India's institutional framework for anti-dumping duty imposition. Next slide. So essentially what is happening is that DGTR does a deep study of whether a case of dumping is genuine or not. All the stakeholders are called in, and it's a long, painful process. It's at least 9 to 10 months of process with deep amount of data being looked at. And if you compare it to the US process, in US if the domestic industry goes and complains, then the complainant, the person against whom the complaint has been put in, are called in and they have to prove that they are not dumping. In India, if you go and complain and say that there's dumping happening, you are called in to prove that dumping is happening. You are the criminal. So that's the first difference between US and India. Clearly, US is progressing, India is catching up. And then after all of that happens, once the anti-dumping duty has been determined by DGTR, it is sent to Department of Revenue. So Director General of Trade Remedies, which is DGTR, is under Department of Commerce. Then it goes to Department of Revenue, which is under Ministry of Finance, because custom duty imposition is a finance role. Right? So under the we will not impose these anti-dumping duties. There may be reasons, there may be right reasons and rationale. Unfortunately, that reason is not being put on paper. It is a suo motu unilateral rejection with no reasons being cited. And it's obviously being taken up in the courts. It's being taken up in the high courts of Gujarat, high courts of Karnataka, and so on and so forth. And as we see, the courts have taken a negative view of this. Now you look at 10 months of DGTR analysis, then 3 months for Department of Revenue to say yes or no or stay silent. If they stay silent, it means it has not been imposed. So it's an automatic rejection. And so at the end of 10 plus 3, 11, 12, 13 months, the industry is back to square one. It's already getting impacted before. And when you go to DGTR, you have to show that you're dying. You can't say that, hey, the dumping is starting, we can see that, so give us some safeguard. No, you have to show that you're dying, you're in the last breath, and the data must show that, only then you can go to DGTR. Again, we don't have a quarrel with that. We are not looking at larger picture. What we are saying is that something was going on earlier. That is roughly what the rest of the world follows. We could have bettered it, but we've gone worse. And therefore, we need to relook at this process. Why after 13 months, there is a rejection? And not just 1 or 2, 90% of the cases are getting rejected. Also in those 3 months, what happens is the importers see that a anti-dumping duty is coming. They start importing to stock over the next 8-9 months. So the first year is gone, and anti-dumping duty is a temporary intervention. So out of the 5 years for which anti-dumping duty is there, the first year is gone because anyways cheap goods have been imported and put in the godown, in the warehouses. And therefore the only last 4 years are left, out of which in the middle of 2.5 years a review is done. And then obviously at the end of the 5th year a sunset review is done. And there are cases where, for example, soda ash, for multiple sunset reviews, we have been bringing back anti-dumping duty. And again, that is being seen as an issue. But if you compare with US, Europe, and so on, they have been putting anti-dumping duty for as long as 40 years. And not just the 10-15% India puts, but 620% that US put against Indian melamine. Massive amount of duties for very long time, whereas we came late to the industrial party. In 1947, when the British left, we had nothing. So when we are late in the party, everybody else who's already ahead of us has better economy. So they will be dumping into India to finish off our industry. So there will be more number of cases. What is the quarrel that the functionaries have by saying that India is filing in many cases? Because we are growing, we need to file that case. Or we be like China, who did not bother, they just finished off the WTO itself. I mean, decide which way we are batting. I have heard responses saying, वो क्या सोचेंगे from the government. अब आप उनके लिए काम कर रहे हो या हमारे लिए काम कर रहे हो? वो क्या सोचेंगे? Go fight with them. हम क्या सोच रहे हैं उसकी आपको परवाह नहीं है, हमारे जो MSMEs मर रहे हैं उनकी परवाह नहीं है, वो क्या सोचेंगे. And I'm just quoting these words verbatim I'm quoting them. And as many of you know, I keep talking about the three holy cows of India, which is the soldier, the farmers, and the MSME. You invoke any three of these out of context and you can push anything through without helping any one of them, without helping the farmer, without helping the soldier, without helping the MSMEs. And we see that repeatedly happening. In the name of the holy MSME, we will not put anti-dumping duty. And we are going to finish off the MSME. So there is something massively wrong going on. Next. So you see the problems, unpredictable post-investigation implementation. Look at the industries, there are crores being put in if it's a larger industry, or hundreds of families being dependent on that industry, and so casually a file is moved. इस पे जाना है नहीं जाना है. अभी ना जो अफसर था वो बाहर गए थे तो वो 3 महीने का लैप्स हो गया. And this is a genuine case. वो अफसर जिनीवा में थी तो वो केस लैप्स हो गया. तो आप फिर से फाइल कीजिए ना, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, 13 महीने रुक जाइए ना. So many jobs, livelihoods are getting destroyed because of this lackadaisical approach. Reduced deterrence, exporters treat the investigations as a mere procedural risk now. It's a bit of an irritant for them. They know nothing will happen. Even the anti-dumping duty will not be put in. Prolonged injuries, dumping, higher uncertainty for domestic investment. And so even in the Chinese circles, it's a joke. Somebody from the industry forwarded a consulting company in China providing services for circumvention of anti-dumping duty in India. It's a published service, how to circumvent. And it's there on the internet, it's in public. Next slide. So what are others doing? Nobody has the two decision-making system that India has. They may have two systems, two different bodies. For example, US and Canada, they have two different bodies, one for looking at injury, one for looking at dumping, but they're not overlapping in terms of decision making. Once they take the decision, it is implemented, that duty is implemented. Similarly, Brazil, similarly Australia, UK, EU, nowhere else in the world do we have two decision making bodies. Once anti-dumping duty is determined, it is implemented unless in one of very severe cases, right? And there are some bodies like Indonesia which has these two body decision making process, but are we going to copy Indonesia or are we going to copy the advanced economies, including China, right? And that's a decision we take. 90% of the cases we looked at has a single decision making body for implementing anti-dumping duties. It is critical, anti-dumping duty is so critical for supply chain resilience, for PLIs. I've been hearing about cases in Saudi Arabia where they are attracting investments. The minister says this is this is guaranteed investment you bring in. You will see 1 year from now there will be an anti-dumping duty imposed on this product, which safeguards the investor right from day one. And exactly 12 months later there was an anti-dumping duty imposed on that product, which safeguarded that investment that's coming in. And this is for processing the waste of the petroleum. So once they do the drilling and stuff, some waste comes out within which there is rare earth and critical minerals. So people are investing into it. They have been told that there will be anti-dumping duty upfront. We are using taxpayer money to put PLI, which is tax breaks and subsidies to set up capacities where our capacities have been finished off, including penicillin G that somebody mentioned, which we finished off. We had 4 companies manufacturing penicillin G. We started importing from China and we finished off our domestic companies, including PSUs. Out of the 4, 3 were PSUs, we finished them off. Now we are giving PLIs. Aurobindo Pharmaceutical has got the PLI, they're manufacturing it. Guess what? The price of penicillin G has been dropped significantly by China. We have seen that with PEDA, agricultural chemical. Without PEDA, you cannot have any rice cultivation in this country. And what we again saw that suddenly PEDA prices, the dumping has started. We checked and we realized that somebody in UP has set up a PEDA plant. We reached out to them. They said, our plant will be going live in the next 2 to 3 months. You see the correlation. Because the plant is going live, China starts dumping. They want to control the supply chain for rice cultivation in this country. We don't even realize. We think you put in rice and you put water and rice grows. That's not how it works in modern agriculture. Who controls it? China is controlling it. And therefore, some of the changes that should come in is that the moment PLI is put in, anti-dumping duty should go hand in hand. Otherwise, we're wasting taxpayers' money. There's no point in putting up PLI without anti-dumping duty. Next slide, please. And so this is the analysis that in US, there is only one body which actually decides. It's the investigating body is the Department of Commerce under USITC. The discretion is it codified in reason? Yes, in every single case it's reason. In India it is not. It is rejected with no reason, or sometimes not even rejected, so by default it is rejected. So nothing is told. In every single case it's yes, 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 except for India. There are two bodies which are involved. Both of them take a decision. The first one, the industry seems to be okay with because it's open, it's transparent. The second case, there's no transparency. Is an open-ended revenue veto? No. Because anti-dumping duty is not a revenue step. It is not a tax collection step. It's not for revenues. It's a short-term trade issue. It has been put in as a trade issue. And therefore, if there has to be only one body which determines whether anti-dumping duty is to be implemented or not, then I think it's obvious which body should do that. Those who don't have a stake and their allocation of business rules does not really allow them to take a veto position. Getting into that is a challenge. Next slide, please. So there needs to be separation of powers. Customs collection does not equal substantive authority. They are only supposed to collect customs. There needs to be structured discretion. There needs to be a public interest, and public interest is not a policy. So what Ministry of Finance or Department of Revenue is saying is that they are rejecting it based on public interest, and that public interest cannot be disclosed to the public because it's against the public interest. So it's a blank thing. For your good, I'm going to destroy you. Predictability attracts capital. Now, why will anybody invest in India? And then we are saying investments are not coming in. Then we are blaming our domestic large investors and saying, why are you setting up capacities in Vietnam and Turkey and other places and not investing in India? There are many large business houses which have got more investments outside of India than in India. Whereas 16% of global population is here, we are a fast-growing economy, market is growing. Why? Because it's easier to set up capacity elsewhere and import back into India. It's free imports. Why not do that? They're all doing that. Next step. So therefore we are saying let there be a presumptive imposition. So if after 90 days Department of Revenue stays silent, that means it has been imposed. So the moment DGTR puts in its recommendation, it is to be deemed, the anti-dumping duty needs to be deemed imposed unless Department of Revenue comes in those 90 days and gives substantial codified public interest test. It says that under these benchmarks, we are rejecting it. If they do not reject it, it needs to be adopted. And we are open to discussions on these. We have taken in inputs from multiple bodies to come to these conclusions. There can be an interministerial board which can look at each of these cases, but we know what that means. That just means more delays. But if we do not trust one ministry, which is the Government of India ministry, which is being put there based on the democratic voting of this country, and we do not trust that ministry, and we are saying that there needs to be another ministry on top of it, then let there be all the ministries, because all of the ministries' products are getting impacted. We are then going back to each of the ministry and saying, why are you letting so much of imports happening? And then they are rushing in and they're calling in on an overnight notice all the industry and saying, why aren't you producing more? Every time that call goes out, industry steps up and starts manufacturing. How many PPE suits did India manufacture in 2019 December? 0. How many were we manufacturing 4 months later? 2 lakh per day. The industry scaled up. Every single product you check, industry scaled up. In spite of their hands being tied up, legs being tied up, everything being tied up, every time the government demands, industry scales up. The country was going dark in 2020 because ammonium nitrate imports were stopping. Industry scaled up. Once COVID was over, the industry is thrown in the bin. Now let's have free imports of ammonium nitrate, let your capacity go to hell. We don't care. So that kind of a relationship doesn't work. If you look at Japan, MITI, Ministry of Industry and Trade, they and the industry work like this. If you look at US, 1791, Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers of America, wrote a report called a report on manufacture. So US or America was a agricultural society driven by slave and so on and so forth. They looked at Europe, and for them the shining .com was manufacturing. So he wrote a report which says the government must now move into manufacturing, work closely with private sector, with the industry, and get into manufacturing. Not that they will give licenses. No, they said we'll work in the back, but we will push you towards it. We'll give you the space. We'll clear up everything. So you will see that all the standards Europe has, US has got a different standard. Why? To block European products from getting into US. That followed with railroads, with Morse code, with telegraph, semiconductors, right till this century that we are in. The same report is carrying on. It doesn't matter if Obama comes, Trump comes, Biden comes, whoever comes. The focus on ensuring that US is the leader in technology continues. Whereas what we see is in India, domestic industry, they have been singled out. Domestic industry and the government sits on two different sides. I've been told repeatedly by extremely senior people, ये सब बदमाश है. If that's the view that the Indian industry is badmash, and it was repeated throughout, so in that same ministry, right from the top to the bottom. So towards the bottom, when somebody repeated that to me, sab badmash hai, I laughed at the person and said, let's assume for a second sab badmash hai, हमारे सारे industry badmash hai. बाहर वाले क्या संत है? Amazon संत है, Microsoft संत है, Google संत है, सब संत है. और यूनियन कार्बाइड संत है, सब संत है. बस हमारे इंडस्ट्री बदमाश है, खत्म कर दो हमारी इंडस्ट्री को. So this mindset is so colonial, and we don't seem to change it, and we have brought in these processes to finish off our own industry. Next slide. So therefore, codify what is public interest. Fair enough, there can be public interest, but it can't be in vacuum. Next. And we have put in the details of what these codifications should be. Next slide. And the 6 pillars of the new architecture: statutory presumption that once DGTR puts in the determines anti-dumping, that there is dumping, the duty comes in unless there is an exception. There is a defined exception. It can't be arbitrary. These are the 8, 10, 20, 200 reasons for which exception will be, but you have to choose from that list. Reasoned order. If there is a departure, the order and the rejection should have the reasons in it. A fixed timeline, it can't be open-ended. Come on, there are people who are struggling every quarter, and then you say that NPA is happening, bank NPAs are happening, और ये सारे industry बदमाश है, पैसे लेके भाग गए. कहाँ भागे? And then they're doing profiteering. Let's for a moment assume that whatever, some Bansal is profiteering. What does he do? He eats that money? He doesn't. He puts in the bank. And then out of the bank, either he invests more into more industry and therefore create jobs, or somebody else goes from IIT Delhi maybe and takes a loan and builds up another factory. It's not going anywhere else. So what does profiteering really mean? Money is not wealth. What happens out of the money is wealth, right? But if that profiteering happens outside of the country, it is lost. So I don't know which way the government is looking at it. As the Iran war was happening, the former chief economist of IMF, I keep forgetting her name, Geeta Gopinath. Unfortunately, she's a family friend also, but she came out with a statement which is economics 101 taught to everybody. And many of the economists in C-DEP, I asked them, that's what they've been told, is that, rupee was depreciating very, very fast. It went from 90 to 96, boom, in like 2 weeks. And Geeta Gopinath's view is that, please let it depreciate faster, because what will happen is your imports will become more expensive, so people will start consuming less of fuel, less of imported stuff, and your exports will become more competitive, so suddenly you will be exporting to the rest of the world, and everything will be hunky-dory. Now what's wrong with that? That's a very simplistic argument. That's a Trump kind of an argument. They are good, we are good, they are bad. They are beating us, we'll beat them. It's that kind of a simplistic argument. What is wrong is that the moment the cost of things go up, such as fuel, people sitting in this room can well afford a 200 rupee per liter fuel, will still be using it. But those who need it at the bottom of the pyramid, the vulnerable sections, they will not be able to get it. It will be white collar modernity. They will die, will not even register it. They will not be able to go for work, they will not be able to travel, they will not be able to pay the ticket for the buses and so on and so forth. You can restructure the cost in the economy, but it can't happen overnight. You want to have fuel at 200 rupees a liter, it has to be spread out over 5 years. You cannot do it overnight, otherwise we will be killing people. People will not have get access to healthcare and so on and so forth. and therefore, we need to have our own economics. We need to have our own point of view. We need to see how India works. And therefore, there cannot be an open timeline. There has to be a fixed timeline, an opportunity to respond, which is not there. It is tathastu. You have said and that's it. You cannot do anything. And then when I was speaking to, again, the Department of Revenue, I said, "Aap kyun kar rahe hain?" Because industry itne badmash hai, wo court chale jaate hain. मतलब कोर्ट नहीं जाएंगे तो कहाँ जाएंगे? आप उनको बोलने नहीं देते हो. You are giving a one-way order. They can't ask you. They can't challenge you. Where will they go? This is a law. This is the rule of law should be imposed, and therefore they'll go to the court. And then reviewability. So that's the 6-pillar process that we are proposing in this report. Next slide, please. And therefore securing a predictable future for Indian manufacturing. So that's what's captured in this report. With that, we'll open up the floor. We can have a round of discussions on both the supply chain resilience reports and the MSA report, as well as the needed change in the structure of Indian trade remedies. So with that, we'll open up the floor.
So I'm very glad that Major General Dhruv is here, because this problem of anti-dumping, this is a great solution. I have been observing this for a very long time. We have discussed this, and I had a more limited solution which I have been pushing from 2017 when I was also in industry. I have written about it, and I have written about it in the collection of essays that India Foundation published as well. The biggest problem, I think we can all agree, is China, as far as anti-dumping is concerned. I think you're more of an optimist. I do not see this structural challenge perhaps going away. So then what is, at least in my mind, was the solution is that if you have negotiated FTAs with 80% of the world, then your what we call our MFN tariff becomes my China tariff. The problem today of raising my MFN tariff is it also hits other countries. I get into a lot of...
You have to explain MFN tariff.
Okay, so MFN, sorry, I know, this is the thing. So MFN is the tariff that applies to every country. But by WTO law, I cannot discriminate between. So the MFN principle means that if I have a duty of, let's say, 15% on mics, then imports of microphones from all over the world, every WTO member will have to come at 15. I cannot discriminate and say it's 11% for you, 13% for you. So what Trump is doing, was doing is a violation of that MFN principle. You cannot have different tariffs for different countries. WTO rules say that I have to adhere to that. There are a few exceptions. One exception in the WTO rule is Article 24, which means if you have an FTA with another country, you can reduce your tariffs for that particular country. You can go to zero also. So for only that country, you can reduce it because you have a formal free trade agreement which is compliant under Article 24 of WTO. So to go back, which means that if I have an FTA with most of the world's large economies and regions, so 70 to 80% of my imports are covered by FTAs, then that tariff that I called most favored nation, which is supposed to apply to the rest of the world left for me is really China. That's where most of my imports are coming. The problem that we have today is, let's say, China is dumping microphones, and I raise my choice, 10%, and I raise my tariffs 40% to stop China, I also impact other countries. But if I have FTAs with them, I've already given them a different duty structure, so they are not impacted. Which means that I do not, if I see a threat from China, whether it's dumping, so we have two kinds of threat. One is dumping, the other is subsidies, which is the countervailing duty that we put when we see active subsidies which are impacting my country. So both, I don't have to go through because even CVD requires you go through some evidentiary hoops. As a democratic country, we have to adhere to certain rules. So then what, if my MFN tariff is my China tariff, I can simply issue an overnight notification and go from 10 to 50, 60, 70 because my bound rates are, so bound rates are another, sorry to bring in another concept. In WTO, bound rates are basically what I have committed to be my ceiling. So for every product that I import, I have made a commitment during my accession to WTO saying that I will not have duties over a certain rate. So for example, if my bound rate for microphones is 80%, I cannot ever put 81% duties. It has to be below 80%. So that's my ceiling. So India, at least at the time of Uruguay round and subsequently, had the good sense of keeping bound rates very high, which means I have a lot of window that I can use. So that's where the strategy that, and to an extent, some of us, have been able to push in that direction. That's why you have seen these FTAs. Of course, we got out of RCEP, which included China at the right time, at the last moment. So that hopefully is a partial solution that if at the point by 2028, 2029, when effectively my MFN becomes my China tariff, I don't even need to work to DGTR. The executive can issue a notification, go from 15, 20, whatever percent, and give you the tariff protection that you need.
Oh, great. Thank you. Just adding to Dr. Preetham Banerjee's point, we have already covered 65% of the global economy in terms of free trade agreement, or pretty close to doing that, and 50% of India's trade under free trade agreement, with the US and the EU getting signed. It's a substantial chunk that we're doing. So we are following your path in that sense. So.
My knowledge about the things that have been discussed here is a bit limited because my exposure to trade related issues was when I was part of Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers way back in 2008. And I think that nothing seems to have changed since then. That was the time when we used to go to Commerce Ministry and then to Revenue Department, and the same system continues even today. So, economic policy making. As far as the processes are concerned, nothing seems to have changed. I was hoping to hear that after 2014 things are a little different or moving forward, but nothing else. Now, for example, this, and it's an eye-opener for me because I obviously didn't know so many things that have been discussed here. And I was just wondering all this while when these presentations were being made, that Chinese must really be laughing at us all the time. What we are doing as far as our economic policy making is concerned. But looking at this presentation and this comprehensive report, which is very, very obvious, I mean, there can't be two opinions on the way forward that has been suggested. Now, what happens after this report has come out? What is the way forward as far as policy making is concerned? Because those who are sitting in this room, obviously they are stakeholders in some way, but ultimately the decision has to be taken by the government. What happens after this report is made public? क्या होगा
Do you want to take that? So,
because while countries like US and Europe are now talking actively about the deindustrialization that they have gone through last 25 years, that conversation is not seriously taking place in India. we have undergone a lot of deindustrialization too. So we need to really take stock of that. Thank you.
Dr. Qayyum, anything you would like to add?
So the other day I was discussing with Dr. Banerjee that the PLI has starting bearing its fruit. So in APIs and key starting materials. But then if we look at the Chinese prices of APIs that are coming in, so they have drastically gone down over the years. So I was talking with the Pritham sir why it is happening. So sir was like, China sees India as a rival. From 20 or 30 years from now, they see if any country will beat us, that is China, it has got the capacity. So they make sure that they dent our production capacity. Number two is that we are doing a lot of FTAs nowadays. We are reviewing our services trade agreement, goods and services trade agreement with ASEAN economies. We are doing the negotiations are on with some of the other countries. And in our presentations today, our colleagues they were showing that from China is rerouting its goods through Indonesia and Vietnam. We have seen the import surge of some of those nylon products and other things that are coming through Indonesia and Vietnam. Now, what we are doing in our trade agreement is that we are further liberalizing our rules of origin, which means that may allow China to reroute more of its products through our FTA partners. So the point is, should we further liberalize our rules of origin or not? Because these are the suggestions that ASEAN people are saying that India's rules of origin are they are still strict. So we should further liberalize them. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want
Sorry, you want to say something?
I just had a question actually. Given that I was a journalist many years ago doing macroeconomic reporting, I kind of agree with you that we've had the same discussions, especially the RBI on the capital account, capital convertibility, the rupee, etc., even then. And what you were saying, sir, I just had a question. I mean, we are a consulting firm. We work with hyperscalers, we work with a lot of these companies. The thing that I keep hearing from the government is, why can't you make it here? It's a very knee-jerk thing that seems to be happening without any application of mind. You can't make a hyperscaler force him to make a server in India because you have been caught on the wrong foot. There has to be an accountability. So there can't be just accountability of a decision. There has to be an accountability of the entire decision-making process. That is one thing. The second thing that I wanted to just ask you, so the Prime Minister has come back from the 3 countries. What is the actual outcome of the entire thing in terms of the economics of the ASEAN trade deals, etc.? What is the crux of it? Are we looking at it from that angle, or is it just more deals being signed and now being put into the MEA press releases? Is there a actual outcome of this entire thing in connection to what we have been discussing, especially from the MFN status?
No, I think if I may take that question, yes, there is. I mean, as I said, these FTAs have a genuine impact, and the long-term idea is to go to a place where minus China, you have these deals with everyone. The question is, how do you stop circumvention, which is this China routing things through other third countries? Now, to be very honest with you, while Qayyum has a point, it does not matter how complex or simple your rules of origin are. It matters how you enforce them, right? Because rules of origin follow a certain logic. And logic typically that India has used is pretty sound. We say that you have to transform the product so it becomes something else other than the inputs, and you add a certain percentage of value, 30 or 40%. Now, when the product actually, and I have done this having been in industry, when the product actually comes in and a bill of entry is filed with customs, all you have is invoices and numbers. So there is some amount of risk assessment that has to be done at the ground in our customs to say, okay, something looks off and I need to investigate. Now, that's where we are failing. Because I can make my rules of origin as hard as I can. If nobody is enforcing it at the border properly or effectively, you will always have circumvention. And what Jayajit was mentioning about consulting firms, etc., this is very true because they've figured out how to beat our risk management systems because we have not changed them for years. There is no thinking. So that's the other part of this whole story that we often miss, is that which is the firm that is importing, right? I mean, there are two things. The US commercial intelligence, and they are one of the best, but even the Australians, they not only keep a database of invoices, they keep close track of who this, the stuff is coming from. And they do actual mission level in those countries, full due diligence to find out what's actually happening. So they use that intelligence to correct for these kind of things. We have no architecture for that. The second problem is essentially that you have to look at the pricing, right? So as we mentioned, we have this DGCIS, which is also under the Ministry of Commerce. So all of that invoice data is fed into their database. Now in today's day, with AI and other pattern generating devices, you can easily find out if even one single firm is off pattern. So we are not using technology, we are not using processes. There's lots of things that we need to start doing that other countries are doing in order to, because that's where really the battle is. It is not going to be, all the rules of origin certificate is a piece of paper, not worth. So unless and until I put the systems behind it, and none of this, sorry to use another American term, is rocket science. There are other people who are doing it. We simply need to borrow and enforce.
Let me add to that because there was another dimension to your question as to what is the outcome. See, we need uranium, we need critical minerals, we need coal, and as the Australians say, the relationship with India of Australia's 3 Cs, coal, cricket, and chickpeas. So we need all of that, and these agreements help us get that access. The second part is executing it, is what Preetham is saying. The rot is below. What has happened is that our larger picture has become more strengthened. We are geopolitically in a much better place, but so much more needs to be done, and that's the challenge. Now let me take the example of, let's say, the India-Japan FTA. Was signed in a hurried manner, 2010, 2009, something like that, 2009 or 2010. And there was almost a gun on the head on Ministry of Commerce to go sign it, with very little consultation. When it was signed, Japan did not even have capacities to service India. And there was nobody who was overseeing that FTA, that what is the extra manufacturing, extra exports that India is doing to Japan. The outcome of that FTA was that the exports that India was doing to Japan kind of withered down, and the exports from Japan to India shot up like anything. What am I driving at is that we don't have a war room which sits in and says your target is now go attack Japan from a trade perspective. That so much of capacity is needed, this is what we are good at, go sell it to them. Japan has that. Japan has MITI saying, you Mr. Mitsubishi or you Mr. Sumitomo, you need to sell so much to India. I will not do it, neither am I giving you license, but you're the ones that I'm going to work with and you will go and sell it. They have set up capacities dedicatedly selling to India. We are not doing it. So operationalizing these FTAs is the challenge. We need to have these war rooms and we need to get out of this mindset of ye to Adani Ambani ke paas jayega. I was in Ahmedabad last week, and I was asking, why are you not participating in the Nicobar port project? You got into Haifa, They said Haifa was not an invitation from the Indian government. We got it in spite of the Indian government. And we're not going to touch Nicobar because the opposition party is jumping up and down. If we get it, they will say that, you know, ये तो Adani Ambani को जाता है. Now the point is, who else can run a port in India of that scale? So we are shooting ourselves in the foot with politics, with all kinds of other conversations without focusing on what I was telling some of my colleagues the other day, the eye of the fish. We have lost focus on the eye of the fish and we're talking about everything else on the side. Over to you.
So, sir, I just wanted to add one thing that we have a positive case of PLI in terms of electronics, that India has increased assembling and we are exporting more of electronics. But the problem is that the China, it has an ecosystem, a network and economies of scale, and it has investments which it has done for the past 30 years in terms of its ports, infrastructure, logistics. So even if those companies are coming into India and assembling, but still we are importing our major products from China. So the ecosystem effect is what India is still missing, and that is why we are having so much of imports from China. So I just wanted to add.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I don't want to react to everything, but all of us know the answer. Unless we do start with assembling, we can't go backward.
Yeah.
That's where we need to start. I've heard the opposition in a very derisive manner saying there's only screwdriver technology happening. Do that too. Who stopped us from putting the screwdriver earlier? In 1960s, Deng Xiaoping stood in Inner Mongolia, looked at the mines and says, rare earth is our oil. 1960s, I mean, I didn't even know what rare earth was before 2010. Right? It's only when China imposed a barricade on Japan on rare earth that I got to know what rare earth is. I had no clue. 1960s. Shall I give more examples? I mean, right now, what China is looking at is exporting power through internet. Can somebody even decode that? So here is the decoding. Here is breaking down as to what they finally understood from their policymakers is that they got excess power. They can't put power lines across to other countries. They can't put a power line to America and so on. So what they're doing is they're converting that power into AI tokens. Their chipset is coming from Alibaba and so on. That is subsidized. You can take it at zero cost. Their AI models like DeepSeek, zero cost, open source. Take it, right? Only cost they're adding is the cost of power. So they're turning power into AI tokens and selling it over the internet over existing public infrastructure that you and I have paid for. The thought process is so significantly different. Here we are still fighting about mera ADD kyun nahi aap approve kar rahe ho. We're in a different realm altogether. So we need to celebrate every single thing we do. If you put a screwdriver technology, it is not screwdriver technology, it's complex supply chain that's being solved. You know, look at what Dixon has done. Amazing stuff, right? And they're profitable and they're fighting against all other manufacturers globally. Now let somebody else go and manufacture let's say the optical transceivers. And the government should then step in and say, what can I do to enable optical transceivers to be protected and safeguarded while they go into 800 Gbps kind of a capacity, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the starting point. Assembling is the starting point. For that matter, Boeing, Airbus are just assemblers. They do nothing but assembling.
I just wanted to quickly check in on this issue. I seem to have realized that there is schizophrenia in the government. That one ministry seems to be saying what the other ministry seems to be saying completely opposite. Like for example, assembly, right? There is, I can't name the firm, big firm, servers, etc. He's being told that because you're assembling in India, we are treating you as a traitor. And therefore you are badmash. At the same time, the other ministry is saying, why are you not making India start with assembly? Like, they are literally across the road. So, it kind of is a very funny business, and when you get a call from the US Embassy, that's fine. I used to work for them. So, the surprising is that our whole of government approach is a piece of paper. Their whole of government approach is actually whole of government. So, we have to somewhere realize that, as they say in battle, your courage is not a substitute to skills. You need to have skills. And the skill is where we are seriously lacking. So I'm just completely clueless as to where even firms are wanting to get into, say, Make in India. AI Summit is fine, but what about the foundational layer? where are they going to go? They're in the end going to go to China, is my sense. That they're going to give up in 4 years, they're going to make a token investment. Maybe Google will stay here or something, but the rest of them are going to migrate because they're going to give up. That these people can't really decide what actually is going to be the equation here. So, not in getting into the optical fiber part of it, or even those little nuances. I'm talking about big stuff. Even that doesn't seem to be going through the.
I think these are all very fair points, but there is a slightly optimistic part of the story, if I may put that to you. And there are global dynamics which are in our favor. I completely agree that there are things in our own ecosystem, and we need there are issues, weaknesses, and we know what all of there are. We have, and as I was mentioning, that some of these conversations have remained static over time. But there are 3-4 things I would like to point out. Number one, I think there is general agreement that we need to create employment. I mean, whether it's the political establishment downwards, everybody agrees. So, any activity that creates employment, including assembly, which is often labor intensive, is welcome, and red carpet is being rolled out. The challenge is this, right? Challenge is how do you then slowly scale up the ecosystem. Now, the big problem that India seems to be facing is that you have an anchor investor, let's say Apple or whoever it is, they come in, but every other component is coming from somewhere else. In many cases, the component makers are extremely niche firms, right? They only do that at scale, and that's how it works. These are often mid-sized firms, not mid-sized firms by our standards, but mid-sized firms globally. They are not these global giants. Their risk assessment of setting up a plant in India is entirely different from a deep pocket entity like Apple, who might be enticed by a PLI, etc. Now, that's where we have very deep weaknesses. And I am saying this with experience. I was in industry, in logistics. I have done some of this myself. Setting up a factory in India is a mind-bogglingly complex activity. Second, once you have, this is a closed room, I hope this stays here.
No, it's getting recorded.
Okay, then I will not say some other things. But getting things in and out of India is a very complex thing, right? So, in this kind of a situation, why we need to really think next, in my personal view, have a 10-year window. The 10-year window is there because the European and Japanese firms, who are often these niche, mid-sized companies doing this in the ecosystem, are facing intense competition from China. That quality story is now over. The Chinese have even caught up on quality. So they were comfortable doing what they were doing in their own geographies. They are trying to say, okay, where can I move to bring my cost down? And it cannot be China because they're going to cannibalize me. So India, that way, is a great destination for them. The second point in our favor is that many of these firms, especially in Europe, were family run. So third, fourth generation, they're not interested in running these businesses anymore. So they're looking at joint ventures, partnerships. So we have they look at India as a very viable, Indian firms as very viable partners. So we are in a sweet spot. So we have a 10-year window. The only thing is, how do I get these very simple brass tacks things right? Now, a lot of people, when I hear, especially, and I call them eminent economists, not derisively, but they are eminent, they talk about reforms. What does it mean? At the central government level, at least a lot of those reforms have been done. Divakar is here, used to run that, whole thing. He still do. The crux of the reforms now that you need, where it goes from 0.0 to production, it's all at the state government level. And that's where we are not really seeing much. There are some states who are better than others, and you see industry voting with their feet, states like Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra. But if I don't have 10, 15 states firing up at the same time.
The question to them was that, why aren't you moving to Chennai? South is supposed to be much better. Why are you still sticking to UP? So no, UP, in spite of all these pain, it's much more productive. Says, but why even bothered here? You have this whole Vietnam red carpet rolled out, and the joke in India is that you roll out the red carpet when they're coming in. Once they're in, you pull off the red carpet. In Vietnam, the red carpet continues, right? And this is, why don't you manufacture and import to India? At that time, we had not put these BCDs on phones at that time. So they said, no. UP is cheaper than Vietnam. These are things that we don't hear.
Yes.
And they voted with their feet to have this, this production facility in UP, which is one of the largest, and they're doing very well in spite of the pain. Now the point is, if we take away the pain, we will be the leaders. Let me take another case where I'd helped set up a missile factory in Nagpur, and the gentleman, I can name that. He was the Vice Chief of the Indian Air Force, Air Marshal Dev, and he was looking at fine-tuning of the engines which he was importing from Germany for the loitering munitions. This again, I'm talking about 2017-18. We kept telling them, they said, no, for so many pieces will not do. Obviously, they will not do because it's that many pieces. Eventually, he figured out that those engines are being manufactured in Coimbatore, sent to Germany and brought back to India. He reached out to Coimbatore, got the changes needed, and then now the engines from 2018 are coming from Coimbatore into his factory. So we have the capability, we just have not codified it. We seem to have a structure which is not supporting the capability. I think what we're talking about is, let's start working towards changing the structure and the framework, and we will be a dominating player. That's my personal view. I just have to say that. Yeah.
So one more thing on the FTAs, we have analyzed it, FTAs pre and post analysis we have done for some of the older FTAs like Japan, CEPA, and our FTA with the Korea. And we have significantly improved our market share in those economies. If we look before the 2009-2010 in Japan and Korea, in their import basket, India's market share was below 1%. It was around 0.5%. But it has gone up now. So that means we are also benefiting from those FTAs. And also imports from those countries into India have gone up, but those imports are the inputs that are essential for Indian industry. For example, auto parts, quality auto parts have gone up. Some of the inputs that go into the engineering goods, they have gone up. But the point is, imports are not always bad, but some imports are bad, and those that are coming from China.
And just to, sorry, I'm taking up time, but just 3 more minutes. Including Indonesia. I mean, if you look at what drives my deficit with Indonesia, it's basically palm oil, coal, and with all of ASEAN, it's palm oil, coal, and electronic components. A lot of which go into final assembly. So, to Payum's point, not all imports are bad. The other point, very interesting data point, with especially Japan and Korea, and with ASEAN also, we have actually held our market share. Right? I mean, for the last 10 years, it went up and then we have plateaued. And that's the question people ask. But the reason we have the FTA is because we're still holding it. If you see many other countries, because what happened, Jayajit, and I think everybody else in this room will appreciate, from 13-14, China starts hyperscaling, and China's share in the import basket of all these countries goes up massively. So which means they were snatching market share from everybody else. We somehow held ground. One is our own competitiveness, but the FTA also helped. The other thing is that in many cases, Japan and Korea's shares have actually also plateaued in India, because our import partner now, unlike 10-15 years ago, is China. So China has taken a lot of share from Japan and Korea for many of those engineering and electronics that used to actually come from Korea and Japan. So the whole ecosystem is changing, and that's why it all keeps coming back to this almost existential fight that we seem to be heading towards with this one country.
So let me also put that in context in anti-dumping duty. Many of the cases we see is that there is anti-dumping duty against, let's say, US, Europe, and so on and so forth, and China along with it. Now, what is really happening is that China is dropping its prices in India. In order for these American and European companies to stay relevant in the Indian market, they also start dropping. And that's where they are forced into this anti-dumping, into this dumping game, which they typically would not have gone into, but China is forcing their hands into it. So China is a big problem in that sense. Yeah. Shall we go around the table? Anyone else? Sridhar, do you want to say something? Or you can pass and we can go around the table to Parijat. Or to whoever, I can't see the last person, whoever is the last person. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, definitely. I'll just quickly reintroduce myself. I'm Padavi. I come from Coventry University Group UK. So come from the academia. Very interesting observation on the optic fiber cable. In one of the segments, you mentioned that there are opportunities for R&D, innovation, and skilling, particularly with industries. Would you help me understand where do these opportunities lie for academia? Because when we are talking about skilling the workers, semi-skilled workers, or capacity building, or even training in those particular industries, where do you see these opportunities lie for academia, particularly for a university who can contribute in training the workers, or providing a skilled manpower for the industries, etc. So would you just help me understand this a little bit?
So from the research side, find an alternative to germanium tetrachloride. For everything else, I'll defer to Parijat. He's the industry expert on fiber optics.
So as you know, on the glass technology, a lot of R&D is going on. So previously we used to speak about normal optical fiber. Now we have come up with a multiple optical fiber, even hollow core optical fiber, which doesn't have glass. The light will flow to air bulb. So it's under development. So a lot of development is happening on the optical fiber area, the glass technology area rather. So there is a lot of opportunity for academia and industry partnership in this area. Currently we have a partnership with IIT Chennai to do some research. So we are open to those kind of research with academia to develop the technology. And as Jayajit has mentioned on the development of the technology, mainly on the alternative for the raw materials, like germanium tetrachloride, whether any other sources where we can extend germanium, even for silica, we can do some research on that to jointly develop a technology, because the technology transferring from other countries is not a very easy job. Not many countries are interested to do those kind of activities. So we are open to partner on those kind of R&D activities.
In addition, Parijat, since you are involved in BharatNet, what she's asking is that do you need skilled workers on the ground to lay the fiber optic, connect them, put the even electronics and stuff like that?
So previously we used to have a institute for the acceleration of optical.
Can you switch on the microphone somehow? It got switched off.
Yeah. So we used to have a team who take care of the training of the manpower and all those things. Now we are also in discussion with DOT for setting up a skill development center in Jabalpur. So this discussion is going on.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. I would be in touch with it for the discussion. Thank you.
Diwakar?
Well, I think, so let me just inform the group who I am. I'm Diwakar. I'm working with KPMG, and I've been involved in the ease of doing business, manufacturing related reforms, etc. with government as a client, essentially. So two things that I want to contribute here is which I think one is that every time we look for what to do, what kind of reform to do, it comes with a knee-jerk reaction always. And it's not just the government, to be honest, it's the industry also comes up with very specific requirement and not telling or laying down the canvas of what exactly needs to be done for long-term vision. आप मेरा ये problem solve कर दो is generally the kind of discussions which happens on the table. We've tried on this. We've tried many frameworks and structures that we can superimpose on the current system to see if there is anything that works. But very honestly, it doesn't work too much because it requires a lot of bargaining with a lot of different set of stakeholders and departments, which right now is not happening. So that is point number one. And point number two, I believe, is that we somehow don't see, as what you were also mentioning, we don't see doing smaller jobs as a good job, and therefore how China would have reached this place? Basically, they would have bought something, copied it, and now they are doing it even better. So there is a journey they've gone through. We don't do that journey somehow. Somehow we're just not looking into it. So maybe these two other things which we, at least we, when I was in my KPMG role, we were not able to, take further too much. But these are two things I just wanted to put in on the table.
Thank you. What do you say?
I'm Jagdish from Manali Petrochemicals Limited, and my concern about anti-dumping on our product, which has been approved by Commerce Ministry, and we had great discussion on this matter between us. So, whatever my point, submission already taken care.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to also talk about your propylene experience that you all went through? That will be informative for everybody because you saw it firsthand.
We are using one of the raw material called propylene, which is our raw material for our polyols and other products. And in that, because of this production of LPG, that has been reduced drastically, and C-DEP has helped us to get some quantity, and we are able to run the plant. And our main product is propylene glycol, which goes for pharma industry, and which is being used for all type of syrups. And in that we are thankful to C-DEP. So,
sorry, yeah. No, I just thought I'll add to what you're saying because what they manufacture is the pharmaceutical is part of the National Critical Essential Medicines list. Without that, we will not be able to provide healthcare. So we kept telling the government, and the government was right. I mean, there was a higher priority in terms of putting the propylene to manufacture LPG because zero LPG was coming into the country. So it was basically a policy judgment call and fair enough. But just going to the details of how it impacts what, we kept telling the government that release a bit of it because it was about I think 1% of the monthly consumption, which if it goes in, then you will continue to have the medicines that are needed. And we said, look, here is first factory closing down, here is second factory closing down. Yours was I think third or something. And in about 15 days time, the medicines in the shelves of the retail shops will be over. And that's what happened. We went through the entire process. The medicine got over. And then finally the government realized, and then we diverted a bit of it back into production of pharmaceuticals. And it's talking about syrup. So what happens in the market is if you don't get the right stuff, you'll put the wrong stuff in. That's the wrong stuff which led to kids dying in Madhya Pradesh and so on and so forth. So that was a linkage because you put a substitute for that product, propylene glycol, that substitute kills, and that was a challenge. Dharma.
Hi, I'm Dharma, and thanks to Jaydeep sir. I have picked up interest in trade and commerce, I think, over the last 3 years. I've been a consultant, I worked on the user business side as well. So what I understand, I'll keep it very general and try to be specific also. I think in the last 3 years of my experience and overall, DPIT and commerce has been doing a good job in reaching out to all domestic and multinational companies to understand their localization plans and again exports. I think they just come with very clear ask, what is your export strategy? How are you going to increase exports and what are your localization plans? And I think every MNC today operating has done a bit of outreach and homework and engaged with the governments. I think this is ongoing, and as Preetham sir and Jaydeep sir have mentioned, that this is a long tail approach. But I think every time you speak to them, these are the only two asks, which clearly shows that the directional effort is there, number one. Number two, when we were just focusing on few FTAs and now we have a host of FTAs now, I think the focus is now on getting real solid investment. It can be in the form of manufacturing a plant, it can be in R&D, it can be GCC. But I think today's FTA negotiations are more on investments, getting inward investment. So again, the government is trying to solve the problem in a twin approach, not have a linear approach. And I think this will show results, and these are showing results. And I think it's great to be part of this momentum because we are doing everything possible, in our own role. So I think, thank you.
Thank you, Dharma. You probably can use this microphone.
Thank you. My name is S.P. Kathari. I am Secretary General Association of Man-Made Fiber, University of India. I took up this assignment 5 years back. Earlier, I was with the central government. I retired as Director from the Ministry of Textiles. I was there for 10 years. Before that, for 2 years, I was with the Department of Commerce. I was associated with the drafting of cabin route for this ASEAN-India FTA. And prior to that, my services were with the Ministry of Science and Technology, that is DST, and Department of High Technology. This association represents the viscose fiber and yarn industry, and our main role is government advocacy. We take up the industry's issues with the government. I have gone through the report relating to viscose. In fact, it has been brought out very well. The issues have been supported with relevant information and facts. I feel that this report will give valuable insight to the policymakers to take decisions on these issues. In fact, these issues are already under consideration of the government, and we have been taking up from time to time. We expect some positive results. Thank you.
Thank you. General.
Thank you, Ajit. Now, for the first time, I found economics and these issues so interesting. It is much more fascinating than the wars we do, and very educative too. I'll be going through these 3 reports in detail. But just a small incident which I would like to relate. And these electric poles, you put up those what do you call it? Those the ceramics, the insulators. The Indians, we make the ceramic ones, and the Chinese started giving us the polymer porcelain ones. And the cost was about 10 times cheaper, the Chinese product. So why I'm relating this incident was, I think about 7, 8, 9 years back, somebody came to my office and he was working with Birla Insulators. And he came because he was a friend to my son-in-law. So he came for a courtesy call and we had a cup of tea, and he just mentioned this. He said that the business is going. I said, you write about it, let me know. Now, he wrote a paper, and then when he explained it to me, I said there's something dramatically wrong in the way we are functioning. Because the ceramic industry, this insulator industry, they're very small one. I think there are 2 or 3 government firms, 2 of which have closed down, 1 is functioning. The Birla's got something, and there's another private player who's into this. So when he explained the problem to me, I said there's no way in which I can take it up, just by writing a paper. So we need some authority. So we got Ashoka University, 3 young kids, who were, and I called them over and I gave them a research project. The data we supplied and the research project they gave. Now it transpired that cost-wise, yeah, that is cheaper, about 10 times cheaper. But there was something which everybody, when it is projected by the bureaucrat or whoever it is, it's very good on paper. Tremendous cost saving. But then what happens? The lifespan of the Chinese one was 10 years, and the Indian one was 37 years. You see, because of our climate condition, dust, smoke, and all that. And then when you go into the replacement cost over a life cycle of 35 years, the Chinese were outsmarted. We were 10 times better than them. That was the difference, because while this may cost 50 rupees, imagine changing it. You get 2 people, you get a machine, you got to climb the damn pole, and it is very expensive. So putting it up, the expense was there really. So based on that, we wrote a paper. I sent it with a covering letter under my signature to the minister concerned, who at that time was R.K. Singh was the power minister. And I forgot about it because I said, who the hell reads this bloody thing anyway? 48 hours, I get a call. they convened a meeting and certain elements of that policy were reversed. They said we can't reverse the whole thing, but they reversed it to a very great extent, which is why the insulator industry of India is still surviving. And that is the time I realized that when you're looking at the government of India, and this is my advice to you, don't put up a problem in a way you understand it. Put up the problem in the way the joint secretary or the deputy secretary or the under secretary or the additional secretary sitting will understand it. There are two different things. Because for you, you have worked at it all your life. And for you, it is evident. That person has got thousands of other things to do. But when he sees something, because the logic which we gave him was very simple. And two pieces of logic in my view. I said, one, the life cycle cost, this is the differential, this is the proof. And number two, I said it goes against the Prime Minister's Atmanirbhar program and you're taking away employment from India. Just 2 lines. It worked. That was my experience, I just thought I'd share it.
I think that letter also worked because it depends on who sent it. So no, thank you so much. I think I personally learned a lot from all the feedback and the conversations. I hope it was helpful to all of you. Please feel free to use the reports, and as I responded to Mr. Gupta, that we will be taking them forward, not leaving them just as piece of paper. Along with all of this, what we have also realized that there is no platform or forum for industry policy professionals to put in their views after doing detailed research. So there is no place where we can get the best of papers in, we can get the best of feedback in a structured manner. So for example, you got India Foundation, but that's for very senior people from the industry, from the political and the bureaucratic setup. But if Dharma wants to put in a paper, there is very limited places that you can do that. So from C-DEP side, we have put together what's called the India Policy Review portal. And I would request you to kind of bring that up, but don't cut the ribbon. I'll request Preetham, Mr. Gupta, and General to come over here and launch the portal, please. We'll come this side. We'll come this side so that we don't block people's view. Yeah. And whoever is taking the picture person, come this side here. And Pratik is the one who has put together this portal. Why don't you come that side? And you can take a picture from there of us and that screen. So you can take the picture. So come. You will take the picture and cover that and us. Tall order, but you will manage. Okay, so we just need to press the.
Press which one?
Just the click button. Yeah.
Okay.
Come.
You can all click.
Yep. Click. Thank you. So that's the portal. General, we have. Thank you. You have one of. We have one of your articles over here.
The next one will come now on the animals, and we'll be talking about the tap port also.
Awesome. So we'll encourage all of you to submit your papers. You can go here and submit. Obviously, it's a very strict editorial, but we'll help you make your point of view better. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I'll request Manoj to give the vote of thanks.
It was quite an eventful afternoon. I believe everyone learned quite a few new things and had an enriching experience. Firstly, I would like to thank our chief guest of the day, Mr. Suresh Gupta ji, for bringing his bureaucratic lens and taking his time out and trying to support us in being here. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your participation. And next, we move on to Professor Preetham Banerjee and C-DEP Center for WTOS team. And thank you so much for illuminating the room on the MFN tariffs and rule of point and rule of origin, and how we can do institutional reforms to take this initiatives forward in the government setup. And we cherish your guidance and support. Thank you to the co-authors of the paper, Dr. Qayyum and Kashika, for your support for bringing in ASI sections and multiple other sections inputs in the four supply chain series. And last but not the least, C-DEP team and industry stakeholders and everyone who is here, thank you so much for your time. Lunch is being served, and we look forward to more of this collaboration in the events. Thank you. And last but not the least, the most importantly, thank you so much, Dr. General Kosher, for bringing your General Katoch for being here. So, sorry for. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. So food is served outside. Thank you, everyone.
The next one is also here. Okay, I can keep the slide.
Yeah, please, absolutely. You meet the team also. Thank you, sir. No, thanks.
I don't have a card.
No problem.
Hi.